Yes, guys, welcome to Little Black Bird 91. We're giving you guys a conversation around men. Can they set boundaries? Are they allowed to set boundaries? Are they allowed to set boundaries in 2023? In recent weeks, Jonah Hill, Kiki Palmer's baby daddy, Darius, um, has been trying to set boundaries, quote unquote, and I put that in quotation marks, for their ladies, and it hasn't gone so well. So the question we're asking is, can men set boundaries when it comes to relationships? Can men set boundaries when it comes to relationships? Partly this conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about Jonah Hill as well, and directly because I think he's the main situation that's happening currently. He has just recently had a situation with his ex-girlfriend who's come out and posted obviously tweets, text messages, of how they used to communicate back in the day. We're going to have our say. Can men set boundaries? But I'm not doing it alone. I'm joined by Jay and myself, and I'm sure a few others will probably join us a little bit later as well. So Jay, welcome to the conversation. How you doing? And let them know where they can find you as well, just before we start and kick off anything mad.
How you doing, bro? How you doing, everyone in the chat? You know me already, man. Jay Anderson. You can find me, as it says there, at Jay Anderson King on Instagram. You can also find me at Kingdom in Need of God also on Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel, but I'll release that in due time when I upload more videos. I just want to have a good run of things first. That's me. I'm looking forward to the conversation, as this is one area I do talk about a lot privately.
Yeah, listen, it's a Mazzoline. Okay, let's get jumping into it because we haven't much time, and I want to get straight diving into it. Jonah Hill situation. I wish I could show you guys the text, but unfortunately, the internet is playing in such a way that it would destabilize this live. But there are obviously texts that came out, and just a little bit of background as well. I think she was at the time under 25 because they put in a text about her age, whatever. So I'm not sure. I think someone's putting in the chat. He's 37. Okay, so she's under 25. He's 37. She's not a full-time surfer. She was actually studying to be a full-time lawyer and part-time does surfing, which she does, I think, semi-pro or semi-professional. It's not full-time. So the surfing was there. She was doing the surfing before Jonah got involved with her. And how Jonah actually encountered her was by sending a message on July the 6th, 2021, I believe, sending a message with a heart eyes to the picture of her surfing, and said he wanted to talk to her. Okay, all right. So that's just a little bit of background in terms of everything, right? And then obviously throughout the conversation, they obviously had a counselor as well who was involved. Apparently, from her perspective, the counselor was very one-sided. Welcome to a world of marriage. Some people have that in their marriage. You ain't seen nothing yet, but so that also was Asher too. She also, I believe, she said she has been diagnosed with bipolar. So she also has mental health issues as well. Okay, so there's a lot of moving components and parts here before we even get deep into what's actually happening. Plus, this also was released just at the time that Jonah also released information that he's now become a father, has a new girlfriend or whatever, etc. as well. So that's also timing, also being placed as well. So this is a really interesting conversation because I think there's moving parts, and I think there's different perspectives one can take. And I don't think it's clean. I'm not going to be backing out. Me personally, my position straight away is I don't back everything that Jonah did, first and foremost, right? I think there's some parts that I can agree with, and I think there's some parts I can say, hey, I see where you're coming from, and some other parts I'm like, I can't rock with that. What's your overall perspective, just as a beginning, so we get a standing point where we're going to be talking from?
In regards to the Jonah situation specifically, there are certain things where even I would say, yeah, that doesn't make sense. But ultimately, if you are in agreement, then you're in agreement. I mean, it's always going to be an issue if you go back in it. But regardless of how Aeneas feel about Jonah, he also gave her an out. He said, it's okay if you don't want to adhere to any of this. I will support you. I'm good. And that to me is important because I know there is a natural fear that a lot of women have to be controlled by a man. But the fact that he was okay and gave her an out, that's important to me. And the other stuff that you mentioned, because I've been through those types of relationships myself, it does come into it. So we do have to tread carefully. because it goes back to, was Jonah the right type of man to be with her in the first place if he's going to put these perimeters on? Because we have to look at how is she going to respond to it.
Yeah, 100%. I think first and foremost, if we talk from this perspective, I don't think Jonah represents all men. First and foremost, right? And I think, but I do think he represents a lot of relationships that a lot of us have probably had in the past, right? Or maybe even currently having right now. And so I wouldn't put that past. I think my first thing that I have to say about Jonah's situation after reading all the text, I was a little bit confused as to what the people were saying that he was being controlling about. And that's because we got thrown right into the deep end with a text where, and I'll read the text as well for you guys. I wish I could show you, but because of the internet connection unstabilizing, I can't do that for you. But I'll read a text for you that he sent to her. I think it was, how long? Let me see what the date is. December the 2nd, 2021, which is actually, I think, 5 months or so after they've been talking, because I think he entered the DMs on July the 6th, 2021. So 5 months into it, and I can give you guys a link. I'll put it in the chat if you want to see it for yourselves, guys. I'll put that in the chat for you guys. So that's you can look at the tweet there, guys, and see the post. And it says December 2nd, 2021, 6:46 p.m. It says, plain and simple, if you need surfing with men, boundaryless inappropriate friendships with men, to model, to post pictures of yourself in a bathing suit, to post sexual pictures, friendships with women who are in unstable places, and from your wild recent past beyond getting a lunch or coffee or something respectful, I'm not the right partner for you. If these things bring you to a place of happiness, I support it, and there'll be no hard feelings. These are my boundaries for romantic partnership, my boundaries with you based on the ways these actions have hurt our trust. Okay, all right. Okay, so and it is interesting. Okay, it is interesting because I think when you get thrown into that text, immediately my thoughts is, obviously, I think that's a really great text. He said to her, listen, hey, look, these are X, Y, and Z. And they're not everything I would be, it's not everything I would write on the text, because not all the things are my particular issue with a partner. But he labeled it very, very clearly and said, hey, this is what I'm not comfortable with, right? And if these are the things you're gonna do, then I'm not the right. He didn't even say you. He didn't say, you know what? He said, I'm not the right partner for you. And if these things bring you a place of happiness, I support it. And there'll be no hard feelings. These are my boundaries for romantic partnership. So when I'm seeing that text, I'm going, what's the big deal then? You know what I mean? Like I didn't get it in that instance. You know what I mean? What's your thoughts?
I'll be honest with you, it wasn't a big deal then. Like let's call a spade a spade. It wasn't a big deal then because he gave her an out. She wouldn't have seen it as a big deal. She might have rolled her eyes. She might have thought, yeah, maybe a lot of older men are like this. I feel like knowing some friends who have dated younger women, when it comes to certain boundaries, there's a slight difference in if they was dating an older woman. And I find that it's because the care is different, you know, between what younger people do and what older people do. But
yeah,
the fact that there's an out, that's a brilliant thing. And just gave her an option. I'm not even going to demonize you for wanting to live a certain lifestyle. And by the way, the lifestyle that she even had, it's not even crazy like that. But for him, he's, you know, it's like, it's too much. Cool, we have to respect that. And that's it really. I really have much to say. Like, he gave her an out, and that's one of the things that a lot of women are careful of. Whether, okay, is this guy trying to control me? If so, in what way? All he's saying is, look, these are the things that make me comfortable. If you're not willing to play your part, it's okay. I have no ill will towards you. Just go and do what you need to do. It's all love out here. But if you're going to be with me, this is it.
So I want to give the other side as well, which is I can see how, and someone said it, I can see how it's a slippery slope. So I'm going to address two things. Number one, most of us use the definition of what he described as boundaries. Most of us use it incorrectly, right?
Yeah.
So when I talk about, oh, this is what I did, I use the same. If that was me, I use the same speak. You know what I mean? We class a lot of things underneath boundaries, which are not necessarily boundaries, but it's common lingo amongst people when it comes to general conversation. Do you get what I'm saying to you? Like if we're talking, I say it's a boundary, like, you know, hey, you know, don't dance with somebody else. I don't like that. you know what I mean? If I say it's a boundary, I'm not trying to be psychologically analysis. No, I'm like, it's a common word we use. It's almost like trauma bonding. When someone says, "Oh, you were trauma bonding," but the actual definition of trauma bonding is not that definition. You know what I mean? When we talk about trauma bonding, so your bonding of a trauma would be a better phrase. But most of us understand this buzzword, and it's so interesting that we get to scream out. And I think, from me perspective, and I'm talking on a echelon of conversation. So what I'm talking about is I'm talking about specifically and just generally around it too. I think the most interesting thing for me is hearing things like him using psychological terms to almost manipulate. And it's like, excuse me? Yo, we have women screaming narcissists from the rooftops about every ex that they date. And it's like, not every man's a narcissist. So are you using psychological terms now to now lambast and label all your ex-boyfriends so that you look clean? So that you don't get an accountability? It doesn't, and that's the point I'm making. And sometimes I feel like we get into a space where I'm also careful. I'm trying to hold a balance here and say, I can see where both sides are coming from, but it's very easy when people start saying, well, that's him doing therapy speak. I'm like, listen, I think he was using the word boundary like poorly, like all of us use boundary poorly. You get what I'm saying to you? Yeah. So that's my kind of overall overspeak of the conversation in terms of like hearing that particular excuse all the time. It's like he was using it necessarily to manipulate. I'm not saying he's not a manipulator. What I'm saying is I don't think that necessarily is an overrun, because a lot of people use the word boundaries incorrectly if they're saying that boundaries is a different definition. But yeah, go for it, bro.
But then all that comes to me is, why does it matter? Because the principle is, doing these things makes me uncomfortable. Right? I can't be comfortable with you as my woman or my man if you do these things. That's what I'm focused on. Right? What we actually call it, you know, I'm sure in a couple of years' time we're going to have a different way of speaking about it. Fine, things always change. But my mindset is actually what is happening. And I feel like sometimes to get wrapped up into that conversation is taken away from what is actually happening. And it's quickly going to turn him into a controlling man, quickly going to demonize him. And let's not forget, the word boundaries didn't start off with us. It started off with ladies, in terms of ladies telling each other, have boundaries. Don't give the man maximum when he's giving you bare minimum. This is where the conversation started. What we're doing is saying, okay, if that's what it means, okay, cool. Let's also speak the same thing, because we deserve boundaries too. So I feel like that conversation takes away from what's actually happening in somebody's situation. Not everyone's situation, but in somebody's situation, in this case, Jonah Hill's situation. That's why I was careful with my words, and I said, all he's saying is, these things make me uncomfortable. If I'm to date you, these things make me uncomfortable, and I'm going to tell you about it. If these are things that you don't want to change, that's okay. I'm happy. It's fine. No problem. Got nothing against you. But if you want to be with me, this is the areas that I feel need change. And by the way, I hope she also said the same thing to him, regardless, whatever he is doing, because she just doesn't mention it. But I hope she also had that conversation about what makes her feel comfortable.
Yeah, and I think it's so funny. I watched a video of a person saying that Jonah Hill was wrong for the way he described the way he used boundaries, and then perfectly explained what Jonah Hill just literally did in that specific text we're talking about, right? So it was kind of interesting, because if I say to you, these things make me uncomfortable. Let me give you an example. There's you have your girl. Your girl's got a friend that you can see that the male friend is a bit. It's like, yo, I see how he's moving. Yeah, he's moving a bit. Listen, this guy has no intention to be your friend. But I've known him for 3 years. Like, he knows my best friend. You're like, trust me, watch him. Like, there's certain things. Listen, I don't think you need to go or something crazy. Like, something I'm like, let's be honest. Some people, maybe when we're more younger, I think as we get older, you kind of learn the rules. You don't do as many of those dumb things. Like, let's say, for instance, you and that friend now might be going dinner. Someone be like, yeah, I'm cool. That's for me. I can do what I want. I want to go to my dinner with him. That's cool. And someone be like, I don't find that comfortable. I'm not comfortable with that. And if that's the kind of setup we're going for, then personally, then I don't need to be in this relationship. Bear in mind, he didn't do it for one thing. He listed a whole bunch of things that are actually happening. So it's not like every time he goes, one thing here, I'm going to leave. One thing here, I'm going to leave. It's a bunch of things I've noticed that have come together. I've culminated. I'm not really sure what's going on. again, I want to put it out there. I'm not saying it's not manipulative. What I am saying though is I'm trying to give a different perspective to say, I'm looking at it and going, yeah, but he's given a whole bunch of things that are issues. Now, whether these things, all of them are things we can agree with, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But that's his insecurity that he says, I don't feel secure when you do these particular things. We're going to, of course, we'll come into another part of the conversation about whether we should have dated in the first place. That's another story. But yeah, go on, bro.
I agree with you. And that's, you know, my thing is, regardless of whether we like it or not, the conversation is, are we allowed to have boundaries? You know, we all have different boundaries, all have different things that bother us. And the situation you described, you know, I've actually been through that situation. And I use the same term in that situation as, these are my boundaries. Like, don't, like, I'm telling you, this is what this guy does. So you need to create proper boundaries now that you're with me. You can't have the same lackadaisical boundaries, lackadaisical boundaries, and think things are casual. No, I know what this guy's doing. I know what he's trying to do. I used to be the same type of man. So I'm letting you know. And I think with things like that, it actually works two ways. Because not only am I saying these are my boundaries, but we're also looking to see how the person responds. And that's why it was, you know, it's and that's key. Like I said in the beginning, he gave her an out and said, you know what, if you don't want to do it, it's cool. How is she going to respond? And if she responded to say, you know what, everything is fine, then it's naturally going to create an issue. So then, is Jonah Hill really the enemy in this situation? Even if we don't like everything that he said, is he really the enemy in this situation when they've had an agreement in order to continue a relationship? And bearing in mind, these things happen every single day. And there's people who set worse, if you use the word boundaries, then people who set worse boundaries, and they don't have a problem with it. So it's okay, so what are we really talking about?
Yeah, and I think this is okay. So this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, right? So toxic recovery says, if you say these things make me uncomfortable, your next course of action is to leave the situation. That's someone exercising healthy boundaries. There should not be a list of things she needs to do. But the point was, after he says these things, he said, if this what you can't do, that's cool. Then I am going to do what? I'm not the right partner for you. I'm going to leave. That's the whole point. So you have the option to make that choice. And I'm saying I understand where some people maybe other men have done some manipulative stuff. So maybe that could come into it. But I'm looking at that. I'm looking at that text that she released. By the way, she released all the text, so that's her releasing it. I'm looking at that text that she's released, and I'm looking at it going, okay, great. If you don't agree, why don't you just leave? You see, it's only controlling to a point when I have some level of leverage over you. It's been 5 months. You get what I'm saying to you? Like, it's not been 5 years. It's not been 2 years. It's been 5 months, if that. You've been started dating. So, like, it gets to a point. And by the way, again, I don't agree with him starting a relationship with her when he knew that she was a surfer. Simple as. I understand things change, but for me personally, we're grown. You're 37. You should have entered the relation in the first place, which is why I can understand where someone can say it's manipulation, because it's like when people are doing things intentionally, that would be a pathway to doing it, and I'm not going to be mad at that. But what I'm going to say also on the flip side is, I'm also getting that flip side again, which is again that he does say he's going to leave. So what do you want him? What more do you want to do? Do you want him to now put? Because here's the thing: if he puts those things and says, "Hey, these are boundaries for me. I'm leaving now." The first thing you're going to say is, "Well, he's being manipulative," because he knows if he says he's leaving now, she's going to want him back. So what do you want him to? Where do you want us to go? Because what you're saying here is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about this particular situation that I don't get. You're saying to me that he should have said that he wants to leave or that he should go. He did. The text actually says, "I'm not the right partner for you." Skibba. And where do we find them now? They're not together anymore. So that's why I think some people are struggling to fully understand where some people are coming from. I get where they're coming from, but I'm saying why some people are struggling to understand where they're coming from. Yeah.
I hear you, bro. And also, let's think about it. If she had uncomfortability based on those boundaries, she could have walked away as well. So realistically, there's a difference between what we think is ideal in every relationship or situation. But the truth is, most people don't walk away. Most people want to have a conversation about it. Most people want to compromise. Most people want to see. Most people want to hope. Whether it's right or wrong is by the way, because we make these decisions all the time. Let's see, because you're never going to get a perfect person who hits every single spot. So they shouldn't have been together. but they was. I don't have a particular issue that they was, because they made an agreement. My issue is from the beginning, if we're having this argument whether a man can set boundaries or not, why is he the enemy? That's my issue. Why is he the enemy when he set the boundary and he gave an out with no problems? We can only assume she agreed. If she was uncomfortable, why did she agree? Why did she stay? And furthermore, why 2 years later is she now saying there is a problem? Is that now jumping on a bandwagon to demonize a man when literally all he did is set boundaries? And by the way, is there conversations about how he treated her in the relationship in general?
I don't know if I've seen those as of yet. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that as of yet. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen it yet, but yeah, I don't know if I've seen that yet. If anyone's got the if there's other text about his actual behavior in a relationship, then yeah, fantastic. Let's go.
Can I just say though, yeah, because someone made, I think it's Crystal K, said it's manipulative first to pursue someone and pretend you are one way and then flip on them after they have fallen for you. I don't see him, he didn't do that. Earlier on, when he got to understand who she is, he created his boundaries. So I can say he was consistent. And I said this in a private chat. Ladies are the ones to say, don't judge me by what I post, right? Don't judge me by my profile. So was he wrong for pursuing her then and thinking, regardless of what she posts, I'm not going to pursue, regardless of what she posts, I'm not going to treat her the way I see. I'm going to get to know her. When he got to know her, this is what he said to her. To me, again, what I don't like, he did to me, he did right. I'm not saying they should have been together, but in terms of his actions, I would say, guys, this is what you should do. If you're not going to judge a woman by what she posts, that's great. Get to know her, have a conversation with her about what you're comfortable with, then you make your decision. See how she responds. If she's not comfortable, don't force her. Don't put her into a position where she can't say no. Allow her to be free, because you don't want to control anyone, because things like this happen. But it seems to have happened anyway. And this is where I'm struggling to demonize him, because the one who seemingly changed is her. If she's saying this is okay, but then 2 years later now she's saying it wasn't okay, what's that about?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think I've seen what's happened here, right? So this is my concession I want to make about Jonah Hill. I think he's insecure. Personally, I think he's insecure, right? And I'll say the reason why I think he's insecure, and I think that's why it's gone. I think that's why it looks the way it does. He's insecure for me because he reminds me, and maybe I'm projecting here as well. I can think back to when I was younger, and when you see okay, for instance, and you do see this in real life. Guy gets a baddie, yeah, gets with the baddie. Now he's with the baddie. He was expecting the baddie to change the way they behaved. You get what I'm saying to you? Let's say, for instance, let me give you an example. A girl's on Insta, right? On all her photos, she turns herself to the side, showing her back, right? Now it's a calling card, right? It's a calling card, and the guy is called, and he gets her, and what he thinks is she's going to stop doing the art. This is why it's so crazy, because actually they're not going to stop, and this is why you need to leave them alone if you can't handle it. But here's my thing. So he gets with her and then thinks the R-shot pictures are going to change, because when you did the R-shot pictures, they are the calling card. I've called, I've rang, I've got through to you, we've now locked it down. Surely the pictures should change. Surely the way you're dressing should change. Surely the behavior should change. Surely the thirst traps should be put away now. That's how the mind is thinking. Unfortunately, I think that's how he was thinking. But when you get into a relationship with somebody and you start off by liking the photo that's them surfing in them neckhead, people are not going to change. That is just a harsh reality. So I can also see why someone might look at it as being manipulative from a perspective, because when you entered and you did Love Heart Eyes on the photo on 6th of July, 2021, the photo was actually a surf photo. Right? Now, I want to be fair to him as well and say that I think there's more nuance to the story because it sounded like there were other things that were happening and I don't know what exactly was happening. Right? Because actually, I think in and I wish I could show you the text, maybe I can read it. In 2 to 3 of the texts that they spoke about, she actually said that she was dumb for what she had said and she was being a doofus about the relationship. Now, she may have been surrendering herself to his particular plight and not necessarily being true about it, but she called herself an idiot by the way she handles certain things. She hasn't got social ability to handle certain situations or whatever. So that may have also played a part in the situation too. And that's why I said I'm being very careful because not only that, she's also bipolar too. So I've got to be very, very careful about before I jump on the Jonah bandwagon. Because again, and listen, this is not me, and I want to make it very, very clear because someone's gonna get at me, and I know they're gonna get at me. Okay, all right, and they're gonna get at me. What I'm gonna say is, I'm being very careful about before jumping on Jonah. Okay, all right, because you may perceive a situation in a particular way, and this is coming from somebody who has a parent that's schizophrenic. So don't come at me. Let me make it very, very clear. Some of the things that they see aren't always the way they see them. And I'm not saying that he's a manipulative again. I want to make it very clear. I'm trying to keep a balanced understanding. But I have a parent that has gone through schizophrenia. Some of the things that they see, you're like, what the frick did you see? What the heck did you do?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying to you? So I'm being very careful about that too. That as he was letting her know that, listen, there's been some things. He didn't make it very clear. There's been some things that have affected the trust in the way you behaved. Now it could be nothing. It could be nothing, and he may be exaggerating things and blowing things out of proportion. But it also could be that something else is happening. So I'm being open to the possibilities of both. Go for it, bro.
I've been with 2 ladies who had bipolar. Now, I didn't know going into the relationship that's what it is, but certain things stopped making sense after a while until it was actually revealed, like why sometimes it's like you're dealing with 2 different people, why one day there can be hysterics about something, but the next day the energy is not the same. So I agree with you. There's a lot going on in this relationship that we don't know about, and we do have to be careful how we tread, because unfortunately these things happen all the time where you usually hear one side, but if you was really in a relationship to see what's going on, the energy would be different. The last thing I want to say is another reason why I don't see this as manipulative, because we all have done this before, where we've gone into a situation actually thinking that we would actually be okay, and some months down the line we're not okay. But that doesn't mean we just say, I want to break up with you, I'm leaving. Again, what is the reality of what happens, not what the ideal is. We're gonna have a conversation and say, do you know what, if we're gonna stay together, these A, B, C, D, E cannot run anymore. That's a healthy conversation to have. And then you have the conversation and you decide what you can, what you can't do. If you decide you want to stay together and you're going to compromise, that's cool. To me, whether you're a man or woman, you can't then come out and have an issue down the line, because you've had that conversation, you've spoken, and you've agreed, as it should be. That's maturity. And this is my issue again. Why 2 years later we're having this conversation? Because regardless of how we feel about Jonah, regardless of how we feel about, so I don't even know her name, but the lady in question,
Sarah.
What's her name?
Sarah.
After some time in their relationship, and they was together for a year, wasn't they? They came to an agreement. Yes, things changed down the line where they both probably didn't feel comfortable, and we've all stayed in relationships way beyond, our comfortability space. But ultimately, my issue is that they stayed together. My issue was that they was together in the first place, not the boundaries that he set. And if anything, not the fact that she agreed. It's just the fact that they just did it. That's where these things go wrong. And I feel like a lot of men get the bad end of the stick in these situations. Like, I've been in these situations before where, I've got the bad end of the stick where I shouldn't have. But I didn't really care about what people were saying. So I stood my ground because I knew what I had done was correct. I knew what I had done was the right thing. And down the line, one of the things I said offline is that a lot of these issues are put out there in the public, but the apologies are usually in private. And I feel like a lot a lot of ladies misunderstand that with the other ladies that they back. So you have to be very, very, very careful about why we have an issue and for what reasons. Like, I don't mind discussing the issue because it's a real thing. Boundaries is a real thing that we need to talk about. So many people are hurt. So many women are hurt because of, controlling men. So many men are hurt because we have ladies that are just behaving reckless, right? So we have to have this conversation. But to demonize Jonah, I can't do it. I understand where they're coming from, but I can't demonize Jonah because of this. It's not a situation where I can demonize him because of it.
Yeah, and that's why I said I use the word insecure. And I think there is, I want to say that there's probably some areas of control rather than manipulation. I want to say there's more areas of control where you're trying to control how things play, right? Because there may be trust issues in there as well. But I want to be very fair and say, let me put my own experience in there and let me put my experience in there and say something. I remember when I was probably like 17, 18, I remember one of my girlfriends had a best friend that was a male, and they were going late. And listen, let me be honest with you. Partly it was insecurity. I'm not gonna lie and sugarcoat anything. And I remember a situation happened at the time, and she was like going around to his crib late at night watching movies, right? But that day we had been exchanging messages, and then she just suddenly just dropped on the face of the planet. I was like, "What's going on?" Then she told me she's at the guy's house, and I was like, I said, come out the house, come out the mother freaking house. Now, this for me personally is insecurity, and it led to a controlling moment, right? But I wasn't wrong. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying about I can hold two things true. And I was insecure. It led to a controlling moment because the way I reacted, I was fuming. I said, get out the house before I run up in them place and things get set. Yeah, them things can't run there. You understand? It's 11 o'clock. You don't need to be running here. Come out the house. Go to your house. Nah. Yeah, it led to a controlling moment. But was I wrong about the behavior? No, because what happened after? You get what I'm saying to you? So I wasn't wrong in what I was seeing. And that's what I'm trying to say to you, that I can hold two sides and be fair and say, so when he's saying that there are certain male friendships, and again, like I said, sometimes you can't always see the relationship with how the person behaves with other men. You get what I'm saying to you, right? You can't see how the situation is, or you can't see how it is with other girls. Do you get what I'm saying to you? Like, you won't see all my relationships with females until you get closer to me. When you get close to me, like, hold a minute. Yeah, I don't like the way you behave with that person. I'm uncomfortable with that. See, just because you're saying you're uncomfortable with that can also be a manipulation tactic. But we don't talk about women doing that either. That just because you have some insecurities, you turn it into a manipulative moment. But you said, no, but my intuition. And now I've got to honor your intuition, and it's not controlling because it's not in the text. Do you see what I'm saying to you? We all have these moments where we feel something, and that's what I'm saying. I'm being very careful. I'm being very careful about it because I've been on the other end too, where I've had a female friend that's got, there's literally nothing there, not even a drip on an ounce. And the girl's been like, I don't like that friendship. Yeah, you're making me uncomfortable with that friendship. Now, she hasn't told me she's going to leave, but the fact you keep telling me you're uncomfortable, what am I going to do? Well, if I care about you, I have to leave that relationship, don't I? Is that manipulation? Oh, because she didn't tell me she's going to leave. It's not. So that's what I'm trying to say to you, that we all have these moments where insecurity can play into it. So I don't want to say necessarily it's manipulative, because sometimes it's not like there's a consciousness to it. Sometimes there is a bit of fear, sometimes a bit of insecurity. Sometimes you are actually seeing something and the person is making it clean for now, and then you find out the milk ain't clean later on. You get what I'm saying to you? And again, there are gray areas, right? Because if I said, okay, cool, I want to, if I want to sleep in the bed with my best friend as a woman, but I have a girl. If my girl says to me, that doesn't work for me. Now, she doesn't want to leave the relationship, but she goes, say, that doesn't work for me. You know what I mean? That don't work for me. I can't have that. You make me feel uncomfortable. Hey. You know that's what I do, B. You understand what I'm saying to you? Yeah? Now, you might not have known that from the very beginning of the relationship, because I might not have released that to you yet. But when you get further in, you realize I've dropped that information. You say it's uncomfortable. I'm going, no. babe, you need to be secure in yourself. I haven't sexed her, I've just slept in the same bed. Now, someone will say that's an acceptable boundary because we all believe that's too far. It's about society's belief of what's too far. But that doesn't mean that's everybody's belief of what's too far. Do you know what I'm saying? First and foremost, I believe that's too far. That ain't gonna work for me. But again, other people do some certain stuff. Do you know what I mean? I'm you know, in that sense. Yeah.
I'll even give an example of what you just said. I have a friend, they've been married for maybe 27 years, 28 years. And he told me a story of, because they met in university or college for Americans. And they was together for a while. They already knew at this point in time they wanted to marry each other. They just wanted to wait until after university. He saw her hug one of her male friends, like front ways. And he said up until that point in his life, in that relationship, he didn't even know that would be a problem. And he had a strong feeling that he didn't like it. So all he did is say to her, I don't like that. And she was confused because it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of what I do. But he said, yeah, okay, I understand that, but I don't like it. So can you not do that? And she said, cool, no problems. So then are we saying what he did was manipulation? I'm not saying he wanted to leave the relationship because of it. And don't get me wrong, there are some insecure men that will turn that into something completely, wild anyway, and cause so much problems. But I think what you're addressing is what is the line then? When it comes to boundaries, do men have a limit and ladies have no limit? What are we talking about? And it's interesting where, hey, Precious, and it's interesting where the demonization of Jonah's coming in, because wasn't it this year that we had an issue? I forgot the young rapper's name. One of these young light-skinned guys, I can't remember his name. He was 19 and he was dating a 27-year-old. He let her know, I'm a man who wants to sleep with other women. Are you down for that or not? She said, cool. It's all good with me. Months later, she was there crying all over the gram, boo-hooing, and now she's pregnant, trying to get everyone's sympathy. Was it last week? She was posting a baby shower and she told everyone, leave me alone, I'm happy. All you people are single or broke, whatever she said, which was a complete, the same people that you wanted sympathy from are the same people that that you're now dogging out. So if we're saying that Jonah's manipulative, are we saying that she's manipulative because she says she's okay with something just to not be okay? So where, are we playing fair? Is it one way for you, one way for me? Where does this conversation start? That's why I'm a big proponent for whatever works for your relationship works for you. Because you can't make everyone happy. Everybody, including all of us, is going to have something to say. That's why I can't demonize Jonah. Because offline, I spoke about Neo and Crystal. As soon as, I don't think they was even married yet, but she stopped being a beauty model. She stopped. And by the way, I know how people feel about Neo. Let's not make it about how you currently feel about him, okay? But she stopped beauty modeling. She, she deleted all her pictures and she said, cool. Since then, all she's complained about is the fact that he cheated. She has not complained about, I guess, her life having to change. Yeah. Some people would, but again, what are people having an issue with Jonah because the lady in question is complaining? Because of whether we call it boundaries or whatever, it doesn't even matter. But why is there an issue? Why is there an issue for one and not an issue for another? And that's where, for me, this world that we live in is crazy. It's like everybody's angry. Everybody's waiting to be angry about something.
Yeah, I mean, listen, first and foremost, like I said, personally, like I said, he gave her an out. Let me tell you this now. Okay, if a girlfriend told, I remember, I think I said before, I remember one of my exes was like, "You dance everywhere, stop that." I said to her, "I'm not stopping. So what do you want to do? Because I don't mind walking away." Now, I might be manipulative by just instantly wanting to end the relationship, or she being manipulative by saying she doesn't like something. She doesn't like it. You know what I mean? She doesn't like it. It's that simple. I don't care. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna continue to be me. And what you gonna do about it? You get what I'm saying to you? Like, and so it gets to a point, of course, and this is why I said I understand also two perspectives, where it's like, if you know she's a surfer and this is why I said that it has to be fair. If I say you're a surfer and you tell me and turn around and say, well, I'm a surfer, so what do you want to do about it? Everyone goes about their business and goes their way. You know what I'm saying? Everybody goes their way. Like, shoot, I can't do this relationship because you can't handle me being a surfer, right? and you're not comfortable. That's why he gave her the out and said you can leave if you want to, and that's what I'm trying to say. Like, apologies, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if I leave that open for you to, you can leave. Well, not even that, you can leave if you want to. The wording was, then I'm not the right partner for you. No disgrace, no shame, no. You know what? If you really loved me, you'd stay with me. This would have been manipulative. You get what I'm saying to you? Like, if I said, oh, well, if you really cared about me, you'd have changed all those things. I've heard. Listen, and I know because I've rolled with some actual manipulators. I know what it sounds like. So, when they put it in a particular way, they want to make it as if like, hey, man, if you really care about me, you'd have held it down. You know what I mean? If I thought you said you never leave me. You know, we hear them bars. I thought you never said you leave me, and now you leave me. And that's manipulation in that aspect, right? But if you say I'm not the right partner for you, he's done exactly what we said he should do. If the thing doesn't fit you, I'm not the person for you anymore, right? Now, if he's and I'll go back to my original point, and I'll let Precious jump in. If he had said, you know what, all those things here are the reason why I'm leaving you, we'd be having the same conversation. The same conversation we had, because the first thing you just said was it's so manipulative that he's going to leave the relationship just over those things. Yeah, but that's what he's saying. He's saying I'm not the right person for you. I'm going to leave. So in all, would have been the same. We'll be having the same conversation where he says, if he had said right that text, it's a breakup text, it's over, we're done, would have had the same conversation. Go for it, Precious.
This conversation is always so interesting. I think it's for me personally, as I said before, look, have your boundaries, that's fine. What I don't understand is why Jonah Hill went for this woman in the first place. Because it wasn't like, for example, she was portraying herself in a completely different way that seemed aligned to what he wanted, and then all of a sudden she switched up on him. I could get that. She was always doing her, and her doing her is what attracted him in the first place. So for him to then turn around and say, I don't want you doing this and this and this, which she was always doing when you came into the situation, is inherently manipulative. And the reality of the situation, those texts, they'd already been dating for a while. This wasn't like we only went on a couple of dates and then I've said it. Even if, let's say they went on 2 dates, 3 dates, and then he was like, okay, this is me, and if you don't like it, then find someone else. I would have been like, okay, cool, I can respect that, because it's really early on in the dating process. There's no feelings, there's no attachments yet. Fine. But this sounded like they'd already gotten quite deepish into the relationship. They've gotten deepish enough to get counseling from a therapist to still have these issues. So at this point, it is manipulative, because what did you just expect that if you were with her long enough, she would then acquiesce to your boundaries? That's what it feels like. That's what it sounds like. And that's where I find the issue, because for someone who clearly has such very strict boundaries, you should already know that this would have been an issue from the jump. So why did it take you so long for you to hold your boundaries or stamp out a line for this? It shouldn't have taken you this long. So that's the point where I'm a bit confused as to what's happening. You can have your boundaries and it can be what it is. Whether the person likes it or not is between you two. I personally feel like some of the things that he said in his list felt very it felt judgy because of some of the wording he used. I was like, okay, now you sound judgy. You don't sound like, okay, oh, I don't want you, I don't feel comfortable with you going out with some of your friends because they seem like a bad influence, or they seem like they're not really trying to support this, or they're hostile towards me. I could be okay. But the way that he was saying certain things, it just sounded very judgy. But he's like, you knew these people going in. You met her friends. You might maybe he did say something about her friends beforehand and said, well, I don't like her friends. I don't like you hanging out with these people. They seem a bit. So maybe he did. But it's a sticky situation when you start getting into the don't hang around with these people, don't do it, because that is manipulative. If you're telling your partner who they can be friends with and who they can't be friends with, is inherently manipulative. So that's my issue. My issue really isn't the boundaries. I just think you should have it. you should be able to say these things and hold your line a lot earlier in the process, because it just felt very late in the process where she's already invested. And it sounded like she at least had maybe tried, but she wasn't really committing all the way to his boundaries, and that's what was causing the issue in the first place. So it just felt very, I don't know, it felt very, I don't want to say sinister, but it just felt off. So that's my thing. I think everyone has their boundaries. Women have their boundaries, men have their boundaries. I think sometimes what happens is because of the power difference in society between men and women, men holding their line on their boundaries feels a little bit more threatening sometimes than it does when women do it. And I think also because there's a history of men holding their boundaries in ways that are threatening, that also follows them too when other men are doing it maybe in a less threatening way. So I think sometimes as men there should be accountability of understanding that nuance and trying to relay your boundaries in the most, I guess, sensitive way you can. If the person isn't trying to at least understand, or trying to understand the root of the boundaries, or at least come to a compromise, then you have every right to step away and be like, you know what, this is not for me. Because it's better to do that than to drag it on and then decide that later on, whatever. But I think my point would just be to just be mindful of where, like what Jay was saying about why is it different. I think the reason why it's different is because, like I said a while ago, sometimes when a man does it, it feels different. And that's not necessarily fair, but there's a history that comes with it. And that doesn't mean all men are like that. But I think sometimes you have to take into consideration that feeling that comes when that happens between a man and a woman, if that makes sense. So that's the only thing I would say to explain why sometimes it can be treated a bit differently, even if it is technically the same thing. Because I always say follow the logic, but sometimes the reality defeats the logic, if that makes sense. So that's what I would say.
Go for it, Jay.
I agree with what you said, Precious. And what, for me personally, one of the things I said in the beginning was that because I have had friends who have dated younger women, there is a difference in, let's say, the boundaries that are set, I guess, like you say, based on the judgments and the opinions of, let's say, what the young get up to compared to an older woman or a man. And the other aspect is, and this is where, because I'm reading the chat and I feel like what's missing is grace. Like this ideal of just walk away, this person must be like this. There's a lot of demonizing. I don't understand. Like, where's the grace? Because I even look at a 25-year-old, she may not fully understand what she wants, what she's comfortable with. You know, I'm not going to say he's going for a younger woman to manipulate her. I'm not going to say that. But there are clearly men who do that. So don't get me wrong. But she may not even understand herself what's going on. That doesn't mean he is manipulative in the situation. She's probably just agreed because she, in her 25-year-old self, maybe not as mature as she would be when she's 30, is thinking, oh, it's not a big deal, it's not a problem, or oh my gosh, it's Jonah Hill. Oh my gosh, I'm who I am. This actor guy, who, by the way, I don't actually see him smile and laugh in movies anymore. I feel like he's always serious. Have you noticed that? So something else going on there, to be honest.
Yeah, he's got a lot of things, to be fair. He has a lot of things.
So, you know, so again, I'm looking at this situation trying to give grace, and that's why I say from the beginning, I agree. They shouldn't have been together. But these are some of the issues that play out where clearly two people shouldn't have been together, and majority of the time it's the lady that comes out and demonizes the man. Most men don't even bother to back themselves. They just leave it as it is.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because we should, but where the question originally comes from, are we allowed to, you know, have boundaries, is because of what you're saying, Precious. It's because naturally we're always going to be looked at a certain way. In fact, let me not say always. Certain types of men are going to be looked at a certain way. And this is where we have the issue because, okay, so what's the solution? Because we can easily say things in a nice way, but every man will tell you, oftentimes it's like there is no way to say things. All it really depends on is where the woman is in her life, where she is in her healing journey, where she is in her understanding of what is this man, who is this man to me, what is this relationship to me. And that's why one of the things I teach is, for every man, when you set your boundaries, when you say what you like or don't like, don't think the lady's just going to say yes and go with it. Don't think there's certain things that she may do as a problem that she's been doing all her life. Don't think she ain't going to fight you. She most likely is. She's going to test your manhood, and you have to be principled and stand your ground. And you're probably going to have all the key words thrown at you, misogynistic, A, B, C, D, E. And before anyone talks in the chat, I'm not red pill, by the way. Precious and Koja know me. I'm not red pill. Women are A, B, C. That's not me. That's not the type of life I live, right? But what I do understand is, as a man, you have to be a certain way. You have to lead a relationship, which means you're going to have these uncomfortable conversations. What they mean to you can be different than they mean to me. Like Koja and I said, certain things that he said in there, we wouldn't have a problem with. We wouldn't even, create an issue about. But for him, that's what it is. So again, what is the issue then? What he said, or the fact that he just had boundaries? Because it seems like the fact that he had boundaries is the issue. But we never talk about a lady having her own boundaries and creating the same issue around that.
No, I agree. I do think there are some issues do you know what? I think for me personally, the ground thing is, are your boundaries based in insecurity that are based in trauma, or are they based in things that just genuinely just make you uncomfortable? That's number one. Because I think a lot of the times what can happen, I always say a lot of the times, I'm not going to quantify, but sometimes what can happen is some boundaries are placed on some people out of trauma or out of a perceived fear or insecurity that hasn't been addressed at its core. Because the thing is, everybody has insecurities, and some insecurities are, I guess, based in more of like a genuine, I just feel uncomfortable, and some are more based out of fear. So I feel like with insecurities, there's insecurities that come out of fear and insecurities that just come out of just being genuinely just uncomfortable, right? So my thing is that you first and foremost, before we start deciding what boundaries you want to set, please understand where your boundaries are coming from. Because what will happen is that you'll get some men who will say, no, this is a boundary, blah, 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 blah. But what's really happening is that the boundary is coming out of your fear of not having control of the situation, being emasculated or whatever, right? And so what happens is now you are mistreating this person by saying that you're placing a boundary. It's not a boundary, you're being controlling and manipulative. On the other side, flip side with women, it could just be that you're scared of being used, you're scared of being hurt, you're scared of all of these things. So you place some boundaries on the men, and it's not because you're genuine confident, it's because it's based out of that fear, and you're also now then being manipulative and controlling. So I think first and foremost, individually as people, we need to know where our boundaries are actually coming from first and foremost. Are they coming from a secure place, or are they coming from an insecure place? And then, because what will happen is, as you said, Jay, if it's coming from a secure place, there won't be any judgments around whether that person is okay to do it or not. You won't be like, oh, it's because you're not mature yet, that's why you're not acquiescing to my boundaries. You'd be like, you know what, that's fair enough. I can understand that you don't feel comfortable with these boundaries, and that's fine. Maybe we're just not compatible then. And there's an element of like detachment, secure detachment that happens with it. There isn't a trying to convince, there isn't a trying to push or persuade or debate or argue or whatever. There's a calm, kind of relaxed, secure way that you could just detach it. Very early on, you won't even have to go through the rigmarole of I'm getting to know them, blah blah blah. But I think sometimes what happens is people have their boundaries because they're afraid, and what will happen is they like the person, they think they're interesting, and they'll say, okay, we'll see later on, once we get an attachment, I'll hold my boundaries, we'll see. And that's where the issue comes from. And I think that's what this Jonah Hill situation is. And I think that's where it stems from. And that's why I would say I do think men can have boundaries. I just think sometimes, as I would say, it's people on social media, it's the minority that's loudest. Some of the boundaries that are put on women by men on the social media we all consume in some way or fashion, some of it just seems very archaic, very unnecessary, very rooted in insecurity. And the same is with some women. Like, you know, when men would joke on the internet and would say women don't like anything, everything's an ick. You know, everything now is an ick. If you put ketchup on your hot dog, is an ick. If you do this, it's an ick. So yes, I get it. It's there's a lot of push and pull from both sides, because there is a little bit of a power dynamic, because setting boundaries is an aspect of that power dynamic, because it's setting a line that, as it's setting a standard that you don't want to have crossed or have diluted. So it is a strategic move within the relationship, but it has to be a healthy strategic move that is understood by both parties as, why is this a boundary for you? Because a lot of times, if you understand why it's a boundary, you're most likely going to be okay with it. I think if you understand why this person has a boundary and it doesn't completely infringe on your, I don't want to say freedom, because I think if you're in a relationship, there's aspects of your freedom that will be given up by default. But if you understand where the boundary is coming from, why it's there, and it feels like it's coming out of a secure place, most times I do think people are okay to acquiesce to that boundary, because it's a contextual thing. You have to also realize that the boundary, for example, the boundary with Jay is not going to be the same boundary with Kojo. So just because I am now in this boundary with you doesn't mean I have to be in this boundary for the rest of my life. It just means I have to be in this boundary while I am with you. And if we just so happen to be together for the rest of our lives, then fine. But it's a temporal, contextual thing that happens while you're in that experience with that person. And I think it is more about just trying to understand where that's coming from. And I think with understanding, most people will be okay to be like, okay, you know what? If it's important to you, fine, let's do it. And then you try and you go that. And then if it doesn't work, if you get there in 6 months, you're like, you know what, actually, I'm thinking about it now. I've tried and and you've honestly tried and it's still not working, then you can both kind of part ways, and it will be amicable, because you felt a respect to your boundary within that X amount of time, rather than 6 months of that person trying to fight that boundary only to land in the same place that you were going to land anyway, because it was never a thing. Does that make sense? So that's what I would say, is that I think I like to feel that most people are good people. I think most people, if you understand the boundary, you understand where it's coming from, and the boundary is coming from a secure place, I think most people will be okay with it, unless it's something inherently misogynistic or inherently abusive or manipulative, fine. But I think on the whole, for most people, it would be fine. I think sometimes we get the outliers that are the loudest because it's blasted on social media. But I don't think those things are outliers, because there's a hella surf coaches out there, and I'm sure a good chunk of them are in relationships. So, it's about looking at what the actual majority is doing rather than the outliers, I would say, as well.
So I think, thank you for even breaking that down as well. I think, and I'll give an example. I mean, I'll go back into my original example that I gave earlier on as well, which I think is quite interesting, because I was just thinking about it as I was listening to you. And like I said, I like to be honest and kind of break it down, like you said, where the boundary is coming from. So, like when I had a situation with the ex, and some time back, and the best friend situation, right, or good friend, whatever you want to look at it, that's a male or whatever, right? I was seeing behavior that was just mad. It's hard to explain, but I was seeing behavior that was mad. When I say mad, it's not all the way cooking. You know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying to you? It's flirtation of a boundary. And I'm not talking about my boundaries. It's flirtation of, this is a friendship. Do you know what I mean? Where it gets a bit touchy feely in terms of gray areas when it comes to that particular friendship. I remember seeing just 2 or 3 instances that happened. I remember one time, and this is where And because I was ready to leave this relationship, I was ready to be done. Yo, I wowed out. I remember one situation. It was something to the swimming pool, and I can't swim in it, so I don't go swimming pool. They went, so her and the girls and him went swimming pool. All right, cool. Then when they get back, they're telling me some story about, I think she was in a swimming pool and I think something happened and he had to grab her, but his hands unfortunately went to her chest. They started laughing about it. In my head, I'm saying, I know these bastards are not telling me this story and thinking that this thing is okay. But remember, it's not one on its own. There are several things that happen. When I said it at the time, I said, are you not being disrespectful? You're being mad. Like, what are you telling me? Do you get what I'm saying to you? Now I called them all out. They were telling me I'm crazy for what I'm saying. Like, yo, he's just a friend. Dagger, dagger, dagger. Now, let me be very real and give motivations. Part of me was insecure. Absolutely. The insecurity more about the fear of losing someone. So let me put it that way so it makes it easier, because insecurity, I want to make it clear so people can understand the mindset. Fear of abandonment and losing someone. Because I love the girl. You know what I'm saying to you? I didn't want to lose the girl. So I'm now trying to put things in place to prevent rather than cure. Right? So part of that behavior is going to come out as control. Right? So I have to just keep it real. But I generally was seeing some shit that was going down. Right? So when it got to that point where I said about she was at the house, and I wowed out. I said, "You two are alone. Parents going to house. It's like 11 o'clock. When I watched a movie, I said, get if we don't leave this house, I'm gonna start messing people up. I will start messing people up because this ain't it. Because y'all making me feel like I'm crazy, and I know that what we're doing, I wouldn't do this. So this is something I wouldn't do. I would keep my, you know what I mean, healthy respect when it comes to opposite sex. Cool. It got to a point. I remember, and I'll say this was control as well, and it was fear based, and I mean, you can go to loads of manipulative. I don't mind admitting that. I have to be real with it, right? I mean, we had one argument. The argument got heated. I was in my boy's car because we were driving to where they were. And I said to my bro, I said, brother, yeah, flip this relationship, but I'm done. I'm out. Yeah, I'm out. I want to be gone. I said, fam, before this gets to a point that this girl does me dirty, I will be out. You understand what I'm saying to you? I'm not thinking about boundaries at the point. I'm thinking about disrespect and man getting taken for idiot. You understand what I'm saying to you? Yeah. So obviously when we land and we get to the place of meeting, we had to have a conversation. It's myself, it's my boy, it's her group of friends as well, right? The guy's not there, but her group of friends. I get there and I said, I'm on militant time. I'm not on this stuff. Because I think personally, my feelings were, again, the fear, the control, but also because I really love this girl. And part of me felt inferior in the relationship with her because of the way that our dynamics were working, right? Because when it came to attention, there were too many guys. And I mean, there were too many. And she would tell me every time a guy coming up to her. And when we had a conversation later on, she admitted she was doing it on purpose to also make me stay, to hold on. So when I say about people understanding how motivations work, I try to hold both sides accountable because people like to make it one side. And it's really not. Like, if people can really be honest, some of y'all are pricks. Okay? I'm not the only one. Okay? You get me? So, but at the time, she's not telling me that. And she hadn't told her friends that she's doing it on purpose to tell me every time a guy comes to her, because she wants to make sure that I'm pretty much begging for the breadcrumbs of her, right? But when I got there and I was having this conversation, I remember her saying about, me and my friends, nothing's gonna ever happen. And I said, listen, I've told you about the situation before. I don't like it. I gave her an ultimatum. This is it. And for me personally, when I look back on it, I think it's manipulative, right? I said to her at the time, I said, listen, me or him, I don't give a damn. I'm happy to walk. Yeah, if you want to keep that friendship, keep it if you want, but I'm gone. It's that simple. Because I'm not waiting for you to do something and turn around and be like, I'm so sorry. Like, no. I see behaviors that are happening and there are things that are going on that are mad. And it's not mad enough to be able to say to somebody, this is what's happening. They'll be like, oh, like, but no, I can see what's happening because I see how it's progressing. So I don't like it. I've told you already. You said you still want to be cool with it. I want to lock it off. If that's what you're doing, lock off the friendship or let me go because I want to go. I'm ready to bounce. Right? Now, personally, I think for myself as a grown and mature adult, that for me, I can see how it can be manipulation. Right? And I can, let me just call it as what it is, manipulation, because from where it was coming from was fear-based rather than part of it was prevention, but I think a lot more fear was enacting in that moment. So after that conversation, she was like, "Okay, cool. I said, you know what? I feel like I'm being bad in this moment, right? Because the girls are on me. She's on me. Like, oh my god, the tears are now flowing. I feel bad. Okay, cool. Here's where we can compromise. Stop this bullcrap of going to his house at midnight. We're not having it. Yeah, yeah. It's just not a thing for me. Yeah, let's stop this. Let's stop it. Cap that nonsense. You lot can still be cool, still be friends. I don't understand why we're waiting for the parents to leave, then we're having film night. It for me, it's like, and I guess I'm thinking of my dog head. That's the problem. I'm thinking of my dog head and what men do, and that's why we're thinking of it. And I think that's also a reason why a lot of times when men are talking about boundaries and trying to elicit control, women don't see it that way because y'all sometimes are pretending as if you don't see that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes women like to keep men friends around. And this is why I think that women too are manipulative, because they know that guy is really not a friend.
Yeah.
Not in the slightest. You know already. And their relationship, they had kissed before, but they said that it never was a thing. It was one of those when they kissed, and it was like, right? So already, what do you want me to do? You get me? You've crossed the boundary line like beforehand, before I ever got there. So what do you want me to do in this position? Now, like I said, someone from the outside looking in could easily call me manipulative, probably end up calling me a narcissist in 2023, would say I'm a controlling, abusive person, et cetera, right? I don't swear, I don't do any of those kind of things. I don't need to do that, right? But it could easily do that. Now, someone said, okay, she knew what's up going at midnight. Yeah, but that again, if we're talking about boundaries now, that's my boundary, but I don't know if I'm not even confused how we even describe boundaries now. You guys have taken the word extra, but that doesn't work for me. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't work for me. And so after the situation, that's what we came to a compromise. So listen, still chill with him, whatever. But the midnight stuff, 10 o'clock. Why are we doing that? Why? You know what I mean? Be sensible, be guided. You know what I mean? Why are we waiting for the mum to leave the yard before we get into there? Do you get what I'm saying to you? Yeah, be guided. And so I'm saying that. So I understand that from another perspective, I'm going to look manipulative. I'm saying that from within the relationship, when you're seeing certain things happening, you're trying to prevent certain things happening, and it from the outside looks like you're crazy. Until the day I was vindicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm saying to you. Yeah, one day I was vindicated. I got a message. To be fair, we weren't really together at that point. I seem to people like, we weren't together. We was on when you're young and you're on that break, but you weren't meant to do anything. We had agreed that nobody's meant to do anything. Okay. Then on that break, something happened with the dude. Mm-hmm. So if you didn't find him attractive, why was anything happening? If you don't find him attractive and why is anything happening? I'm vindicated. In that moment, when I say vindicated, it's not that you cheated. I'm vindicated that this friendship was never a friendship. Because I don't kiss my friends. You understand what I'm saying to you? Yeah. This is why I don't label any woman as a friend. This is why too many women are, be my friend. Hey, I think you're cute. You're not my friend. So, we're cool, but you're not my friend. I want to understand that.
I get it. I feel you, but I feel like you say, so when you were saying like you were taking that preventative measure, that's the point. That's the key thing that I want to pull out there, is that this is the issue that I think sometimes people have in relationships. Preventative measures never work out for you, because all you're doing is preventing the inevitable. If you are uncomfortable, you speak your discomfort. If it's not taken seriously, you step away from the situation. Because what will happen is you will fall into that place now where, Kojo, you said you gave the ultimatum and now you become manipulative. Because you're trying to prevent something that you don't really have any jurisdiction to prevent. Because you can't control anyone's behavior. Their behavior is going to be their behavior. When you try to control it, that's when it becomes an issue, rather than you just being like, I'm going to leave it. And the reality of the situation is, it makes sense to why you felt discomfort. Because really and truly, if you're in a relationship with somebody, you really shouldn't be going to the opposite sex's house at midnight. For what?
Why? Why shouldn't you?
Either party. No, as a woman, as a man, you shouldn't be.
No, but why shouldn't you?
Because the reality is that sometimes, as people, we have to realize that you cannot put yourself in positions where things can happen, especially if there's already a context.
Wait, pause. That's subjective.
What do you mean?
What you're saying is subjective. for instance, if she said, because what you just defined is beautiful, right? And I agree with you, but it's subjective. For instance, you said everybody knows what it is. You go at 12 o'clock, quote unquote, we might call that booty hours, right? But as she said to me, to quote it back, was anything can happen at 5 o'clock. And she's absolutely right. I
Yeah,
could do something at 5 o'clock.
of
So
course.
what you're saying is now subjective, because
Yeah.
at that point, if the person said, well, okay, no, go to at 12, we can do it at 5.
Yeah, but the my counter to that is what I said at the end is context. Context is key, because the reality of the situation is, you just said you're waiting for your parents to leave. So you are waiting for a context in which you are alone, for which you have privacy. There's context in you two have already had a kiss. So there's already been some form of physical attraction. This is not a situation where, oh, I've known this boy since I was 4 years old. He's my brother. That's not the. There's a context to the subjectivity now, in which can give somebody enough ammo to feel uncomfortable. You've seen them now in their natural state when they're together, and there is a little bit of back and forth, kiki and flirting. There's a little bit of emotional micro cheating going on there. So there's a context in which now it makes sense as to why it feels uncomfortable. And the reality of the situation is, Kojo, even if she was going there at 5 p.m., you would still feel uncomfortable. What you're really uncomfortable with is the nature of their relationship. It isn't necessarily the midnight, but I do feel like we should also call a spade, and that when you are going to somebody's house at nighttime, there is an element. There's a different feel of when you're going to somebody's house at nighttime than when you're going to somebody's house at 4 or 5 p.m. And I feel anyone who tries to act like that's not a thing is telling the lie, is acting silly, is acting stupid. Let's just call a spade. Now, whether or not something's going to happen is, again, yes, subjective. It's a case-by-case basis. But there is already a preconceived notion there, and that's fair enough, because the reality situation is, if my boyfriend went to some woman's house at midnight, I'd be like, I don't know what you think you're doing. I don't know what you think you're doing. So that's the only thing.
No, what would they say to you? That's my friend, though. Why are you being insecure about the situation?
I would say I feel uncomfortable about that. Okay. And I guess the context would also matter too. If it's a situation where I know for sure that these two people,
you've been in a relationship for 7 months, it's going well, but this is now a situation that comes up. But of course, Jonah's situation is slightly different.
Yeah, I would say.
Are you gonna say uncomfortable?
Yeah, I would say I feel uncomfortable,
and they say,
I would appreciate if you wouldn't do it. Then I would
say. Wait, hold on, wait, pause. You say what?
I would say I would appreciate if you took my uncomfortability in consideration. If you're not comfortable with it, fine. Then we'll call it a day. 7 months. Okay, fine then. But my thing is that the context matter, because if it's a situation where I've seen them together, I've seen their relationship, and I'm comfortable with it when they're around, I'm like, okay. I would still be a bit like, okay, I mean, you could go there at 4 p.m. You don't have to go at the midnight. And also, are you alone? Or are you with other people?
There's that alone at 4 p.m.
You could be alone at 4 p.m., but that's why I said the context of their relationship also takes into consideration as to how comfortable.
The context is subjective because it's my perspective. This is what I'm trying to say to you. This is why I said that it's my perspective. No, so for instance, you don't know her story.
I guess.
You only know my side. So from my perspective, this is what it looks like. When she tells a story, it might look a little bit different to how she clarified the situation. And that's why I said that I don't want to jump on Jonah just yet, because there wasn't enough information to make deduction. What she showed in the text was not enough.
Of course, it's always a one-sided thing.
Because the way he was prompting it is as if there's already been some things that have happened. So, and especially my perspective, right? I mean, my perspective of that situation. In the town that I was living in, nobody knew about that relationship. So when things were going wrong, I'd only say whatever I did. So imagine if now, if people are asking about what happened in that relationship, they can only say, well, Coach must have done something, because I would only say what I did, because that's how I protect people. But in reality, the other person was moving mad, and I'm moving mad as well. I can't lie to you. I did some stuff I was mad. You know what I mean? So I'm not gonna say it's perfect at all. No. Oh, I got my own back. That's for sure. I ain't let that go. But what I'm saying is that, again, it will be a perspective slightly. So I'm not saying that you're wrong. You're right. I'm just saying that some of what you're saying is subjective because it relies on the perspective of that individual person as well. And so, yeah, just going back to that Jonah situation, there's a little bit of that perspective thing happening there. Yeah. But I don't disagree that I definitely think he's insecure. And I think that's come across as control. Yeah. From my projecting to that situation, I see it as That's how I remember when I was like, you're seeing things that you don't necessarily like, and now you're kind of bleeding it into other areas. For instance, her surfing. I personally, I don't see how you can stop the surfing. You understand what I'm saying to you?
It's a joke.
I don't see how you can stop the modeling. I think he maybe could have been a bit more specific. What kind of modeling are you talking about? For instance, if I start seeing that you're now doing topless modeling, I'm gonna feel some type of way. Baby, that's not for me.
And that's and I think that's fair enough. I think that's what it's kind of, you're thinking about it, is that there isn't a trust there, because you know the reality is if you trust your partner, there's things that you will overlook, and maybe, for example, you might even overlook the whole going to somebody's house at 12 because you trust them. But that's a again, that's what I'm saying, that's a
They may
case
trust
by
them,
case.
yes. Yeah, you may
Yeah,
trust
that's a case by case
I don't trust them.
basis. and that's
No,
completely fair. That's completely fair. But I just think, like, yes, say what, never, for me, never make an ultimatum, never make it a preventative thing. That's what, don't try and prevent
So should you
the
leave?
behavior. You leave the situation. Don't
Or would you
prevent
leave
anything.
that situation? If your man had a female friend that was a little bit too close, nothing else actually happened, would you leave?
I would leave
6 months in.
I would leave if my discomfort isn't being taken into consideration and
How long
respected.
would you wait?
I wouldn't have to wait. If the person was like, oh, you know what, I understand, I apologize, I don't want to make you feel discomfort, I will try and, like, you know, make things better. And then if they say, yeah, then we can rock with it, and I'll keep my eye on it, we'll see what happens. But if you're like, nah, then that's it, then, isn't it? That's because you also have to remember, if it's it's a situation where you have to take into consideration my discomfort. You don't have to acquiesce to my discomfort, but at least try and take it into consideration. And if you're not willing to, because the thing is, it can escalate. It can, if there's a discomfort there, it can escalate. And you don't want to put yourself in a position where now you're trying to prevent someone's behavior, because that's when it becomes controlling. That's when it becomes manipulative. And all that happens is that the person ends up doing it anyway, because now they're like, well, so I think
you wouldn't leave right on the spot, though. That's the point I'm trying to say to you. Like, you wouldn't leave right on the spot. You would try to monitor it, see how it goes, and then
it depends on what they say. It depends on what they say. Because
well, they don't say direct no. I'm assuming the fact that he put that tweet, the tweet that she put out with the text message she put out. I'm assuming that it wasn't that this conversation might have happened before, right? Because manipulators don't just come out and boom. Manipulators, if they're manipulator, he's seeping it in, right? So which means there should have been pretext before this of him kind of initiating some of these kind of conversations, not just come out boom. But yeah, no. Anyway, let Jay go because I haven't talked for a little while. Sorry about that.
I was listening because obviously Precious is coming along there, so I want to hear what Precious has to say. But this goes back to the point where we have to just accept what actually happens in reality. Most people just don't walk away. That just doesn't happen. It's easy to say, but most people don't do that. So where do we go from there? And I'll give 2 examples. The last one will be about myself, right? But the first example, and this situation made me mad. There was a lady in a previous workplace. Everyone thought, wow, this lady's stunning. She had a boyfriend who lived with her in her mum's house. I don't know what happened. I didn't ask any questions. But on lunch, she had to call him, speak for about 2 minutes, put the phone in her bra so that he could hear every single conversation she was having. We all thought that was crazy. That guy deserves to be called all different types of names based on what we know. Obviously, we don't know where did that start. Did she cheat before? You know, what does he feel insecure because maybe as a man he's living in her house? And I feel like part of the insecurity is what Darius is dealing with the whole Kiki situation, and he's just projecting out in a completely the wrong way. But that's a situation where I say, guys, you cannot do these things, and that's where it becomes a problem. That's an example of control to me. There's no excuse for it. There is no out. There's no leeway. I'll be honest with you. Even if she did cheat, to get to that point is control, because it's ridiculous. Like, but talking about the situation about friends, right? And I remember at the beginning of the conversation, I mentioned I've been through this situation. Now, there was a situation where me and a girl that I was with, let's say 18 months. No, let's say about a year before we met. There was a particular guy that she had known for years, a family friend. And there came a point in time where they both liked each other. Nothing happened, but they were also in 2 different countries. So I can't say nothing would have happened if they was both in the same country, because they would have seen each other. So who knows? I met this girl, and then we started talking. While I'm speaking to this girl, this guy's calling her at 11 p.m. Say 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1 a.m. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? These are not hours that your platonic friends call. It don't make sense. And he was in a country where it's either the same time or there's maybe like a 1 hour time difference. So there's no excuse for it. You know what I mean? You can call, message at any time. So why does he specifically feel we can call you at these times? Then she says, you know what? This is how we used to speak back in the day. Okay. Why has nothing changed? Why hasn't a boundary been put in place? Because you're saying to me you don't see this guy anymore. Agree to it. Nothing's gonna happen. So my spider senses were tingling that this is not a situation that I need to be okay with. During the course of the next few months, she would let's just say she wouldn't, to me personally, she just didn't want to see that this guy was more than what she was saying it was. For her, we're friends. I was saying, listen, I'm not stupid. I'm a guy. We've all done this before. The guy best friend or the guy waiting in the wings. You're just waiting for an opportunity. Sometimes you can't go diving in again. You have to wait for the right opportunity. Cool. When this guy told her that when she told him that we were seeing each other, there were three specific things that he did. Well, two specific things that he did that I was told about at the time it happened. Each one, it's a long story, so I'm going to go into it now. But each one is not what a platonic friend, not the response that a platonic friend would give. But every time she kept minimizing the situation. And then months later, and a conversation happened between the both of them where he was talking about coming to the UK, etc. And this is what reminds you of what Kojo was saying in terms of you're not going to, nothing you were saying it, when you're not going to be comfortable at any time, because it's true. Because I actually said to her, whether he comes here or whether you go to the country that he's in and he says, yeah, come, let's chill, let's do that, I'm never going to be comfortable because I see what this is. And I feel like a lot of times people need to be honest. It's not about how you keep your friendships, it's about this particular person. This particular person makes me uncomfortable. But some people will generalize it and say, well, if this is what's going on, maybe all of these guys, all of these girls are in the same boat. And we need to be careful about that. But anyway, so it came a point in time where we had a big argument about this situation because of how she dealt with me in the situation. She didn't consider how I feel. She was saying I'm making something out of nothing. I was being attacked at the wrong party. Long story short, after the argument, she did say, all right, I'm not going to speak to him anymore. That's cool. Afterwards, a couple of months later, I said, you know what? It's not that deep. It's cool. But at the time, I felt that she understood why I had an issue. I didn't realize she didn't fully. She just thought she didn't want to allow this situation to spoil what we have. Cool. Now, she hadn't heard from him for a while. And so she said, okay, what's going on? Where you been? And that point in time, he confirmed everything I had been saying for almost a year, that he wanted more. She didn't know what to say, and she called me to apologize. Now, for me, because when we talk about do people leave straight away, nothing changed for the best part of a year and how I felt about this situation. But unfortunately, it did take her almost a year to actually 100% understand that I was right from the beginning. And unfortunately, it was him having to confirm it rather than her listening to me. And I can say in that particular relationship, that was probably the biggest argument that we had. That affected it in a major way. And that's simply because of how she dealt with me. But I didn't leave straight away. But the reason why I didn't leave straight away, because I was in a better place than I was maybe 2 or 3 years beforehand. I was in a more healed place where I didn't need to run because of that. What I wanted to pay attention to was how she's going to respond. And I had to realize I need to address it in a different way, because she keeps on being defensive about what she was thinking. Whereas I'm not trying to address what she was thinking. I'm trying to address, in this situation, if the shoe was on the other foot, you would have the same problem that I have. It's a factual situation, not one that's based off feelings. This is why I say again, the ideal about just walk away, it's the ideal, it's fairy tales. But what do people really do? Because as you progress in the relationships, I think, was it Dali or someone I mentioned in the chat, whether you call it boundaries, laying down the law, whatever it is. At this point, I'm even confused now, right? It does change, and you address it as it is. That's not manipulation. Letting someone know that, okay, last year I was cool, this year I'm uncomfortable. That's not manipulation. That's maturity. There's nothing. That's why I said grace needs to be given to people in this situation, because you need to have these conversations. That's why people break up and say, do you know what, we grew apart. Do you know what, it wasn't the same no more. Do you know what, we just wasn't the same anymore. Things happen. This is life. So that's why I say all this demonization of whether that's Jonah or other people, we need to be careful because we're missing so much context. But at the same time, these things happen all the time where people are together and say, do you know what, I cannot do this anymore. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's honestly okay. In my situation, I didn't walk away because of that. But from what I'm hearing, well, I can't even say most people. I'll say most people will say, yeah, walk away, blah, blah, blah. To me, that wasn't enough to walk away. That wasn't enough to walk away at all.
Yeah.
That's
I
not
think,
mm.
and I think that's why I said, boundaries are very contextual. They're very subjective to each person. That's why I said every boundary you come across in a relationship is very contextual within that time and that experience of that person. And that's why, unless it's a really crazy thing, a lot of the times I don't think you should really take it too personally, because it's only for that moment in time. Now, if it's a moment in time that you stay with that person forever, rather than, you agree to it. If things change, you have the open communication. That's why it's important to understand, come to a compromise, come to an understanding. But I think sometimes what happens is there is just an immediate onslaught of this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, whoa, what's happening here, kind of thing. But I understand what you mean, and that's why I said, yeah, I agree. There is a lot of grace that should be given. And for me personally, I think I always try to take that in my mind, that there should be grace given. So it's not an immediate like dash where, but it's a situation where, yeah, there's a conversation to be had. At the very, very least, there's a conversation to be had. And I think that's what's the most important, is that open communication. But also, because I have been seeing it quite a lot in the chat, people are going crazy about what micro cheating is.
Micro cheating.
Everyone is like, what is micro cheating? So just a quick explanation. Micro cheating is just a situation where, for example, it's not anything that is like outlandishly, and we've lost Kojo. It's not everything that's like outlandish. It's like, for example, if you're in a relationship and you are relying emotionally on someone else, you may be commenting like sexual or inappropriate comments on someone else's social media. You may be like liking like very provocative, suggestive pictures of other people, or you may even jump back on a dating app while you're in a relationship and you're swiping, and matching with people, even if you're not talking to them. Those kinds of things, those small, tiny things that are betraying, the trust of your partner, and if they knew, they wouldn't be happy about it. Basically, that's micro cheating, and or like flirting with people on through DMs and messages, even if you never meet them, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, but
What I
it's not, huh?
What I want to say that, and what I want to say on that as well, is that a lot of people don't realize what they've been doing is micro cheating.
100%.
And again, whether we call it boundaries or not, I'm confused anyway. Maybe we need a different word to use it. That's fine. A lot of situations where there's other boundaries or laws that need, I don't even want to say laws that need to put in place, it's not militancy, but where uncomfortability needs to be displayed, is because some people don't realize what they're doing is micro cheating.
Yeah.
What they're doing is disrespectful.
Yeah.
And I mean, and this is why we've had this conversation offline, and I say sometimes this can happen both ways, but I don't date men, so I'm going to address specifically ladies, right? Sometimes with ladies, you may defend a particular point as if all women say, no, it's not that. But you will have a whole bunch of women that will say, do you know what, that person was right. For example, where Jonah said, why do you need to be around these guys and etc., or why do you need to post this on Instagram? Every single lady, I guess of a certain age, is going to defend and say it's not about men, it's not about you, etc. But time and time again, there are a lot of ladies coming out and actually admitting, "Do you know what? That person was right. I use that for validation. I use that, to feel good about myself. I use that as a way to talk to guys because I like to flirt, because I like to, peacock, because I like to show myself off." And as guys, we hear this. A lot of ladies do tend to tell us the truth privately, not in regards to our relationships, but in their relationships with other men. So this is why some guys can react in a particular way, because it's not out the blue. It's because of what some of these ladies have told, the guy about what she's got up to in the past.
Yeah.
And Kojo's behind the scenes. He's not gone. He's just behind the scenes. He will agree with this, that sometimes us guys, we've been that party that, the lady said, "Don't worry about us," but he should have worried. He definitely should have worried.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this is where the difficulty happens, because it's not an isolated case. This happens all the time. And I feel like that's why when it comes to men setting boundaries, or whatever you want to call it, it does need to be listened to. But my onus is on the guy to make sure they're a guy that the woman can respect. That's where it starts. I'm not saying automatically going to receive that respect. I don't believe when ladies say that, because that doesn't happen. What I'm saying is, before you even want to come out the gate and start saying whatever, make sure your own lifestyle, your own behavior is one that she can respect, so she can replicate what you're doing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it should be equal on both sides. If it's a boundary for you, then it's a boundary for you.
100%.
And you should also respect your partner's boundaries too, if you want your boundaries to be respected, because a lot of things, it's just fairness. I think what happens when people get upset is because it might feel unfair to them. And that's why I said about understanding your partner's boundaries helps it feel less unfair. Because a lot of times people are angry and they're upset and they feel some type of way because they feel that the boundary is unfair to them, because maybe they see behaviors in you that you're not adhering to, or maybe they've set their own boundaries to you and you haven't respected it, but you're like, "No, I'm the man in the relationship, you should respect my boundaries." That's not going to happen, my G. It's not going to happen. It's a two-way street. There's grace given to both people. And I think, even with the idea of what micro cheating is, of course, I feel like there are set things that are micro cheating. And I think those things are objective.
Work husband, work wife.
Yeah. I personally just think those things are objective. And even when thinking about the theory behind micro cheating, the psychology behind micro cheating, there's some things that just feel very objective. Now, I do understand there are definitely subjectivity to it too. And I think, as somebody said in the comments, like, if you communicate that you're okay with it, then fine. But I like to give a general rule of thumb is, if you think that what you're doing in that moment, if your partner found out, they would be upset, that's all you need to know. If your partner found out that you did that, would they feel some type of way? Yes, then there you go. And that's a general rule of thumb that will usually protect you, regardless of subjectivity, objectivity, whatever. So I think that is what I think, because the reality situation is everyone has different opinions. Some people see things as objective, some people see things as subjective, some people use the excuse of subjectivity to excuse their bad behavior. That's number one. But yes, a lot of things are subjective. So I think if it's a situation where your partner would be okay with it, by all means, great. Because that will also change, because you might meet someone else, another partner, who isn't okay with it. So I understand that. But yeah, I think there is just sometimes where people don't know that they're micro cheating, because one, there's something they've always done and they never got caught, so they just do it. Or maybe, other people have allowed them to do it, and, they just get away with it and it's fine. So, yeah, but, cheating doesn't just come down to the physicality of you had sex with somebody or you kissed somebody or whatever. And for some people, the emotional cheating feels worse than even the physical cheating. For me, I think they're both as bad as each other, but I think, some people, there's people have different tolerances, different lines, different things that you can cross. I think I just feel like you should be respecting both people. I think a man can say, yeah, I'm the man of the relationship, respect my boundaries. And I think a woman should be able to say, well, I'm the woman of the relationship and I need you to respect my boundaries too. And that's how you can have that reciprocity in the relationship. It will never be equal per se, because I think people need different things, but there needs to be some element of equity. You need to give enough so that the person feels fulfilled and feels respected, and that person needs to give enough so that that person feels fulfilled and respected too. And it needs to feel okay on both sides, and that's the only way it's going to work. Because if one person feels that they're sacrificing themselves or whatever they're sacrificing to make you happy, it will never work.
I agree.
It will never work. And I think sometimes, because women have a history of having to sacrifice a lot emotionally for a relationship, I think, I always say society goes in pendulum swings. When there's a societal change, usually it goes to one extreme to another, and then eventually it finds its way to the middle. And I think what's happened is now, with women trying to have more of a voice for themselves and have more, boundaries that keep them safe, some people go to an extreme. So it's just about finding that middle ground that means that both parties can feel respected and not feel like they're sacrificing their happiness to make someone else happy. But again, relationships are difficult. A lot of it is trial and error. And that's the hard part about relationships, is that sometimes you don't know until you get there. And then you're like, oh, snap. Now I have to and it hurts, and then you have to break up and do all so yeah, it's hard sometimes. Yeah, you just don't know until you get there, and it's like, oh, awkward.
And even on that point, I want to keep talking about grace here. Thank you for saying that, because we can all look back, and it's at varying degrees, but we can all look back like Kojo did and realized, yeah, okay, I understand why people may have said could say all of that about me. Because we have to learn. It's trial and error. Depending on who you date, what type of person you date. I mean, offline, we talk about, I mean, in America, you all know who Safari is, right? And he always says, I'm Jamaican with how he talks. So with the dances, the daggering, the basically dry sex, we talk about a lot of that offline, because in our group, we are Africans and Caribbeans. But unanimously, we all say our partners cannot do that. Absolutely not. But some people, in the comments where these things have happened, some people say, well, it's part of culture. I don't see it as that deep. It's not an issue. I mean, someone who has an issue with that shouldn't be demonized and said they're misogynistic, or they have misandry, or they're insecure, etc. It's just, I don't want another man or another woman having dry sex with my partner, and that is okay. That's why we have to be careful. But I agree with what you're saying because of the extremes, because you do have people who are so extreme with the words that they throw out because they don't agree with what someone says. And this is where it's just crazy for me. This is why we have to be careful, absolutely careful. And to go back on the Michael cheating, when I was younger, in my late teens, I got accused of encouraging ladies to like me. At the time, I was thinking, what are you talking about? What do you mean encouraging them to like me? And even if they did, I'm not going to do anything. But I had to grow up, and I had to realize, the way I am, the way I talk, the questions that I ask, the flirting that I do, I understand why someone used to say that. So I had to change, because I didn't want to put myself in that situation anymore, or make the women that I'm with uncomfortable. I didn't try to hold on to this identity or hold on to this. I said, this ain't okay. Do you know what I mean? I can't be out here, have a whole missus, but then I got other women out there thinking it's a possibility. Not that they've even told me there's a possibility, but if I'm being wise, basically the way they're moving, as soon as I'm single, they're ready to pounce. They're ready to show me something.
Yeah.
There's someone at my workplace, right? He was going through like a separation and divorce with his wife, and there was a work colleague who basically helped him through it. As we speak now, him and that work colleague now have a baby, now live together. I mean,
yeah. See, that's what I mean.
All the time. So, that's why sometimes when certain things are said, I'm not quick to be like, oh, why are you saying that? It's like I can give you 1,000 reasons why that actually is a problem.
Definitely.
And in marriage counseling, they use this term, closed back doors. exes, people used to like you, used to like close back doors. Because when you leave these back doors open, you're likely to use them.
Yeah.
But they're gonna chuck seeds inside, try to see if they're gonna hit the soil and grow. So that's why having these discussions, you need to, and I agree, some things are extreme, completely extreme. Like, I've never had to tell someone, I don't like your Instagram, delete these pictures, delete your Instagram. What I've had is ladies come to me and say, are you comfortable with it? I'll delete it if you want. They've come to me. I've never had that conversation with them. But I also tend to date women who aren't trying to be baddies on Instagram. They ain't trying to be half naked, all day, every day, call themselves a model when they're not really a model, call themselves an artist when they're not really an
Jay,
artist.
don't need to do that.
I've never had that. And I'm not saying well, first of all, let me go back to choosing a person. I purposely don't even see those people. I don't look at those people as people I want to be with anyway. So maybe because the type of energy I'm giving out, that's why I don't really care about these people. But naturally, the women that have brought into my life, they look beautiful, or with the things that they post, but they're not doing the most. They still get attention, but they're not doing the most. So I've never had to have that conversation. I feel like that's a key thing for all guys, and I'll agree with what we all said in the beginning. Listen, forget all that. Don't judge me by what I post. No, you do it and avoid, so you can avoid this headache. Because very rarely is someone going to be okay. Like the whole Neo and Crystal situation, she was okay deleting. That's a rare occasion. Now you have ladies that will fight you to death, to say, how dare you tell me to delete, etc. Why even have the argument? She has a right to keep what she wants to keep and live the life she wants. So do you. Get on with your life, do what you need to do. And that's it. Like, don't force boundaries, male or female, down anyone's throat. Address them, speak about them, change them if you need to, and live your life based on what you agree. If you agree to go separately, go separately. Anyway, that's my
It's interesting because I think someone in the chat said, like, sometimes you should want to change for your partner, and I think there is a catch-22 with that. And I think, yes, in some aspects you should want to grow and develop with your partner, not necessarily change for your partner, but maybe almost is how you say things is very important. Semantics, people always try to say, oh, semantics are very important. Context is very important. I don't think it's necessary that you change for your partner, but you can change with your partner. As your partner is changing, you can change. As you change, the partner changes, but it's not because it's for them. It should always be something that feels natural, feels comfortable to you. There's also be communication, and you might want to grow in and be a better communicator, maybe for your partner. But it shouldn't be for your partner. It should be because you should want to be a better communicator with your partner anyway. Not because it's for them, but because you know that it's healthy. I think it should be for the relationship, not for the person, but for the relationship. And the relationship, it's its own entity. It's a living, breathing organism that changes. It matures. It has its ebbs and flow. The things that you do should be for the health of the relationship, not for the person. Because person will change, relationship will change, but the relationship is a thing that serves both people. Person doesn't necessarily serve you in their entirety, if that makes sense. But the relationship should be something that is serving both people. So you should be doing things that are helpful and healthy for the relationship,
100%.
Not for the person. Because human beings are naturally, in a way, a little bit fickle. We change our minds. We evolve. We have days where we're feeling good, bad, and ugly, and it goes up and down. But the health of the relationship is what's important, because a lot of the times those simple rules and factors and boundaries that are good for the health of the relationship don't actually change. They stay consistent. Those are the foundations of the relationship, and that's what helps you cope with all the ebbs and flows that life brings you, or ebbs and flows that will that a person will bring you. And I think that's why you should be able to do things for the relationship, not for the person. And that's why both people do that, because it means that it doesn't feel one-sided. It doesn't feel like one person is sacrificing everything and doing everything. It's a joint effort between two people.
And I feel like what's going on wrong as well is that people are making those choices yes, it's for the wrong relationship. I want to use a different term. For the value in the relationship doesn't make those changes comfortable. So to me, I'll say to people, make sure that your relationship is one that's worth, you know, whether you have to change, whether you have to evolve, whether you have to compromise, whatever it is you need to deal with, because you'll have to do these things in relationships. Just make sure the relationship is one that, you know, once you make those changes, it's going to make the relationship even better, or at least maintain the healthiness that you're talking about. And I feel like so many, mostly women, have been through bad relationships with men from father downwards, that it's very hard to see, if I change in this relationship with whatever my identity is it really going to work out in my favor? Rightly so, feel like, hey, what? Are you crazy? No, that's not going to happen. No, I'm staying the way that I am. It's not the most helpful, as we see now in this generation. It's not the most helpful. But I understand, like you said, where that comes from, that initial fear, which means, okay, I'm going to protect myself from this man who's going to, you know, treat me a particular way. Look, and someone who's, I'm British, but I have an African background. You know, I've been with women of other cultures. In fact, let me quantify that, because before people start saying something. So for the past 10 years, I've been with mostly Caribbean women. Yeah? Now I'm with an African woman. And I've had it where the stereotype of an African man, or someone who comes from an African background, is that, you know, we're going to treat our women a certain way. I'm not like that. But these ladies still threw that onto me. So in the way that I'm saying, I had to be like, what are you doing? And I didn't really get angry. I just had to explain, hold on a minute. Yes, I come from this African background, but I don't treat you this way. You know what I mean? This stereotype, I get it. I'm not even going to argue about it, but I don't treat you this way. So why are you giving me this energy? But I understand why they was giving me the energy.
I want you to remember that when you and Kojo put stereotypes on me.
What? Oh, we joke around, don't we? We joke around.
And you know.
Everyone, it's a private joke.
All the time. But yeah, no, I understand. It's true. Like everyone, that's what I'm saying. I get it. Like it is so different for everyone. Every relationship is so different. But, you know, and I think it's the same for men, to be fair. There's sometimes when a woman will be like, you know, this is the change I want to see in you to make this relationship better. And the man's like, no, I'm not doing that. Because when I do that, I get walked over, or this and this. They see it as like getting walked over if they try to. Some men see like being a better communicator as like oh, so what? I have to be accountable to you now, or I have to tell you where I'm going. They get very defensive. They get their back up a lot. So exactly, and it's like, you know, that there are some things, and maybe it's because of my psychology background, but I just feel like there's some things when it comes to the health of a relationship that is objective. I truly, honestly believe there are some things that objectively are just better for the relationship, and then everything on top is between the person, you know, and they need to decide it. Because the reality is that you also have to take into consideration, like when you said about, is the relationship worth it? Just like as you were saying, some women, because of their experiences and the way they attach, they can't see if that relationship is worth it, but they're not sure. They're in that toxic cycle of, I don't know if actually this is me being resistant, or if this is actually not a relationship that best suits me. And the same goes for a lot of men. A lot of men will be in a relationship where it's a healthy relationship. It may not be the easiest relationship. Sometimes there's elements of discomfort, or sometimes there's elements of getting, or even feeling comfortable, or feeling like, oh, you know, maybe there's something out there better. And then the relation doesn't seem worth it. And then they're like, actually, we're not compatible. And it's that avoidant attachment that happens there a little bit. So that's why it's so important that sometimes even that element of, do you know if this relationship is worth it, is even a little bit of a catch-22, because it's like, is your judgment even coming from the right place?
There you go. That's true.
And that's the difficulty as well. And on both sides, you know, on both sides. So yeah, it's difficult.
No, I'm gonna add to that as well, because
the Toxic Recovery Hub for Women just said, I can see just from this conversation why someone would put that.
What, New Precious?
I'm assuming they're talking about me.
They're talking about me. I think she's talking about me, to be fair. I feel like there's a lot of angry energy towards men from toxic recovery women. But that's cool. That's not a problem. I don't take no offense.
But yeah.
It is what it is.
Someone said, but you were born and bred in the UK. You
Exactly.
see, okay, so I just want to make it very clear. I think people, when you are an African person and you even if you were born and bred in the UK, your parents being immigrants into this country is a very significant thing, especially specifically for African. I can't speak from a Caribbean point. I'm not Caribbean. Specifically, from just to explain for people who live in America, the culture, like for example, I always say, right, I wasn't actually born in the UK. I was born in Lagos, but my parents raised me as Nigerian as they possibly could in Britain, right? And that's what really happens for most African families. Most African parents are going to raise you as close to their culture as they possibly can in a different context. And I think that's what happens, is that when you grow up in, even if as a Brit, you still feel a sense of connection to the country in which you originate from, and you still see yourself as African because your entire setup is made from that, if that makes sense, you know? So that's why, you know, Jay can say, as an African man, even though he was born and bred in the UK, because I'm sure his parents raised him as African as they possibly could in the context in which he was. And that's why, you know, that's why that happens. I don't know. Would you agree? Do you think I'm off base?
I agree, because that, again, the stereotype will always exist between, let's say, Africans. Let's keep this a black conversation between Africans and Caribbean. The stereotype will always exist. So as a person, you come along and you have to actually just show who you are. Some people are going to be like, no, I don't care. I'm going to think because you're like this is, you know, how you are. And it's up to them. That's cool. Like, we have jokes behind the scenes, right? We won't go into, I won't embarrass you, right? But we have jokes behind the scenes, right? But, but ultimately, because this is a boundary conversation.
Yeah.
This is where, you know, you need to be real about it. You know, in fact, no, let's what can I use? What can I use? Okay, so for example, coming from an African background.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll use my dad, for example. He might come home, let's say 9 p.m. I remember this back in the day. And he might call my mum to come and make a food called fufu, for example. That's not a 20-minute thing to do.
No.
You know what I mean? But because if he's an African man, to him it's, you know, why not? I'm going to do this, blah, 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 blah. But growing up in Britain, you have a lot of ladies that would say, I ain't going to do that. 9 p.m., are you crazy? But it's a difference in culture. For me personally, I will never do that. I don't even want to do that. I don't care if in fact, my missus, the way she is, I'm not going to say she's going to do that every day, but there's going to be times where she might like, no, let me do it for my baby. I would tell her, don't. I don't want you doing that. Go and sit down and rest. I'll sort myself out. So that's an example where some people who are not African can, you know, let's say have that stereotype and think, because I'm African, I'm going to demand, because I'm going to, you know, I'm going to control you. I'm going to do all these different things. And it does cause problems. You know, and a particular relationship that I was in, it did cause problems until I had to sit down and break it down to the person. I'm not like all these things that you keep on saying at all. And I'm giving you examples. And she didn't know what to say. So it's like, and it did harm the relationship for a long time until she realized she needs to stop.
Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, as someone in the comments said, when you are an African that is born and bred in the UK, you are different from an African who's come from Africa as an adult, of course. Like, we're not saying that. But I do feel like as an African born in the UK, you're also different from other Black people in the UK. So, and it's the same, and I would assume it's also the same for Caribbeans. I think I think sometimes with some people from the Caribbean culture, I think because the Caribbean has had a much longer standing relationship in this country than Africans have had. There's a difference there. But I think, yes, of course, you will be slightly different. There's things that I may not accept that somebody who was born in Nigeria and lived there until she was like 28 and then came here would accept, of course. But there is definitely a shared culture and some aspects of values that I share, that I've been brought up with, that as a Nigerian, being in Britain hasn't changed. So I guess that's more kind of what I mean. And I think that kind of goes into what you were saying, that yes, stereotypes are there because there is a evidence for those stereotypes, but it's not a generalization. There's people even in Nigeria who wouldn't even do what you've seen happen.
Yeah.
Because even in Nigeria, things are changing too. Things are modernizing. Like, not every woman in Nigeria now is the stay at home housewife cooking. That's not. Trust me, I'm just as surprised as you, because I will. There's been times when I'm like, oh really? That's not happening anymore. Like, we're in 2023. It changes. Things modernize. Things move on. So, that's why you kind of have to take everyone at face value. You shouldn't apply the stereotype, because everyone has different experiences, different ways of being brought up.
I just want to address something.
Yeah, people are really going crazy in the chat.
Toxic recovery for women. The only question I have is, like, what? Are you okay? Because you have some extreme negative energy. And by the way, we do live in an extreme world, so we understand where it comes from, and etc. So I don't have a problem with you personally. I just have to, everyone, this is, as you can see, playing out. This is what we have to deal with. As a man, you do this from women, and as women, you're having to deal with this from men. Extreme, extreme, extreme. It doesn't help. When you are rebuttaling everything I said with an extreme response, it doesn't help. Not every relationship or situation is extreme. You might not even understand what I'm talking about. I'm here in the UK. We actually do have these conversations on a daily basis. In terms of the expectations in the house and the boundaries that are in play or laying down the law. This is a big conversation, because it's about how women want to be treated by men because of what they saw their mothers go through, which for a lot of time is very negative. This is why this is a conversation. So if you don't understand it, cool, but allow us to explain it. It's not an extreme situation. Like, come on. Like, there's a difference. Like, in the UK, you're either... Okay, let's talk African, right? No, in fact, we can talk Caribbean as well. You're either born back home when you come over here.
Yeah.
You're either first generation.
Second generation.
What is minority is black people who just identify as British. That is in a minority. Most people here, even if they're born here, still identify with Africa. The same thing is in the Caribbean. Like Precious was saying, with the Caribbean, they are like maybe 30 years ahead of Africans in terms of, being in the UK and acclimatizing. So there's a slight difference in generations and what people do.
Yeah, and that's not to say that Africans didn't actually. There are some Africans who did come during the Windrush time,
before that, but not enough.
But it wasn't in the same scale.
No. So these conversations that we're having, it's honestly, it's a big thing, because it's different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this is us in terms of talking about boundaries, what to expect. My missus, she will say that she was in a previous relationship where she felt suffocated because the man was a typical African type of man that didn't even care about her heart like that, and he just cared about what he wanted. You know what I mean?
I could never. And we've had this conversation. I've always said I can't do traditional African man. It's not for me.
There you go.
I know my portion. I know what I can handle.
See, don't be a boundary. They say you can't do it.
Oh, never. You have to be acclimatized to the things that I'm also acclimatized. Because
it doesn't work. So you wouldn't put yourself in it.
You'll never see me go back home and be like, oh, let me go collect the husband. It's okay. It's fine. I'm okay. But yeah, but it's the truth. It's just, it's different. And I think it's so interesting to see the differences in this culture and differences in how people say it. And you know what, look, there are some things that some people have said in the chat I completely agree with, and I'm like, yeah. And there's some things I just feel like sometimes, the way that you say things can come across very hostile, and it can come across, sometimes people do say things to make you feel uncomfortable because they want you to be able to see how uncomfortable the other side is, but sometimes what that does is that it just alienates people more than it does bringing them in. You know, sometimes it is you do catch more flies with honey than you do with poison. So it's sometimes just about how you phrase things. But you know, it's the internet. Everyone in the internet has their way of communicating, and it's different. Like it's different, you know.
Brave
But we
internet.
appreciate everyone's everyone's opinions. And it's a
still
safe
smiling.
space. Yeah, it's a safe
Still.
space for you guys to say what you think. I think Kojo said, if did you want to do like if people wanted to come in and have a chat?
I don't mind. I know there's one person that will probably come on, but let's do it.
So yeah, if anybody
Let's
wants
go.
to join us in the conversation, please feel free. Otherwise, we'll keep chopping it up in that. But
let's go.
Also, I want to say, because I saw it earlier and I was going to mention it. I don't know who it is. I think it's AO Logs. They were like, Precious sounds like Hillary Clinton right now, and I don't know if that was an insult or compliment. So I'm gonna choose.
Like very, very professional. Let's say it that way. Let's take it positive.
I'm gonna choose to take it as a compliment.
Yeah, there we go.
But yes, the internet is definitely undefeated. But yeah, if anybody wants to join, they can. If we can just try and not have it be hostile, that'd be great. Because I get very awkward, and you'll see it on my face because I cannot hide my expressions.
Can I say this as well? Because let's address it. No one has actually called me controlling at all. Okay, it was just that because I was from an African background, there was an expectation because of the stereotype.
Yeah.
And that particular woman has come back to apologize and say she got it wrong.
Yeah,
she was the problem.
Yeah, I mean, okay. from all that I know about you, Jay, I wouldn't say that you come across as controlling. Kojo Health? No, I'm joking. I'm only doing it because I know he can.
Nah, all good people.
That's my perfect Kojo that is behind the scenes.
Kojo, yeah, it's all good people. Did Kojo post the link or?
I don't know if he's even paying attention.
Nah, he's
behind the scenes.
Yeah, he's working.
Oh, you can actually he did post a link. Remember, we've got it in the thing, so you can copy that link.
Where did you post it?
In the Instagram chat.
Oh, is that the same link? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's the same link.
Because you mentioned you post it in the chat, but I'm not sure. Hold on.
I think that's the same link. It's this one.
But at the same time, though, I think only you can post in the chat for the because I'm using my phone and you can't post in the chat on the phone.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, so Kojo, you need to pop your head up. But in the meantime, I was gonna ask. So remember, I asked you in the chat. I was talking about the idea of how much, when is the contribution to finances acceptable or not acceptable? So I gave the example of, let's say you bought your own house and the mortgage is a set thing. You ask somebody to move in with you. Would you ask them to contribute to the mortgage, or would you ask them to focus on the bills, or would you be like, well, it's my house, you're not on the deed, so I'm going to focus on doing that myself? And I guess it goes along with the idea of boundaries. Is that a boundary that you set when it comes to finances? Who pays for what? Or is that more of an equal thing that's happening there?
So this is a good conversation because we've been having a lot of conversation about 50-50 relationships, what expectations of women, expectations of men. So my response to that is, if, your scenario was I bought the house on my own accord, it's just a 3-year relationship, I'm not married or nothing, right? But you're now coming to live with me because of your circumstance. The way I see it is, if I was able to buy this house on my own, and this is me as a man, I'm not saying this is what women should do. I'm saying me as a man, if I was able to buy this house myself, that means I can afford it.
Yeah.
So why am I going to ask you to pay the mortgage? It don't make sense. Being in the house, obviously we're going to eat more food. We're going to be doing certain things. I do have friends who will say to their missus, pay 20%. But for me, I'll be like, you know what? Just cover the shopping. It's cool. Just cover that. And at the same time, there are things that always come up. It could even be holidays, but let's just say there's always certain things that I can get extra money there, extra money there. For me, yeah, just go and do it. Like it's not a big thing, you know. And if I'm even going to be more wise, I'm going to say, do you know what? Let's put our money together. I'm not just saying you don't have what you have or you have separate accounts. What I'm saying is, if we can use both our monies to have a greater lifestyle, you know, let's do that. You know, let's see what we can use this for. But ultimately, if we're not going to do that and we're just using what we have, I'm covering the mortgage. That's it. You do, you know, cover the shopping, you know, or wherever it is. That just let me do what I need to do. I will never say to you, because you're in this house, you must pay 50% of the mortgage, even if I can afford more. I don't feel that is right. Now, if we buy a house together, there are some people who might say that's a circumstance, but I'm the type of man where even when we're married, I want to be able to cover the mortgage. You know, me and my missus have discussed that. Like when we're married, that's the goal, that I'm covering the mortgage. You know, and you know, this ain't about me. And her name will be on the house as well before anyone starts, you know, be reckless of what they say.
Yeah, that
It's
kind
not
of
about
goes
me.
with somebody asked somebody asked you actually
Oh,
directly.
yeah.
I think it was Grace Mercy. So Jason, are African men expected to pay 100% of the bills?
My dad said, no matter how much money he doesn't have, he will always make sure that at least the rent or the mortgage is paid. Coming from an African background, a lot of the men have pride in terms of being able to take care of a woman. So I would say there is an expectation, but because of the time that we live in, you know, people's salaries are not really matching up to what the expectations of the economy. But I don't personally know a man who is in the position to take care of 100% of things and doesn't want to. I don't know this type of man. But if a man can, he will. But there is an expectation for an African man to lead, to be strong, to, you know, to be a certain way. Just don't do it in a toxic way.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable contributing to the mortgage if my name's not on it, and if it's not, like, I really don't see why that would be a thing. But I'd be happy to pay half the bills and happy to cover food, shopping, and whatever. I think if it was a marriage thing, then I think it should be 50-50. It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
No, I mean like for the mortgage and stuff. It doesn't have to be. Like if you're happy to cover it, I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to be like, no, I must pay my money. But I would be happy to do the 50-50 mortgage and bills if we're both on the lease and it's both our responsibility to keep the ship running. Then that's fine. You know, obviously I think it's interesting because it kind of goes into what you were saying about the joint account thing. So would you feel some type of way? I'm only asking, so I know of people who do feel some type of way. Would you feel some type of way if your wife was like, I must have my own separate account that you don't have any access to, you don't know what's in it, it's my account. The joint account, there's a set amount that I put in there. We've agreed that, you know, we put a set amount in that joint account. Anything outside that isn't something that I'm going to share. And not that she's like hiding anything per se, but it's just not something that she's going to share with you. Would you feel some type of way about her having her own account that you don't have any idea what's in it, what's coming out of it, access to it, whatever?
I would have a problem if you didn't. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to have some level of autonomy. You know, what I agree with is that we are all transparent about the income that's in the house. No one's hiding any money. And that needs a level of trust, right, in terms of financial responsibility. Let's say we have it. We have a joint account where all bills get paid from. It's not about who earns what. It's, you know, this is where it gets paid from, cool. And then we both have our separate accounts that other money goes into that we can spend on what we want. We don't need to check in or say, she doesn't need to ask me for permission, etc. Do whatever you want with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, end of the day, how are you even going to be surprised as a man in your birthdays or different things if she doesn't even have that in the first place? Like, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like,
But
I
would you
understand.
have like a limit? So you know some couples have like a limit of how much they can spend before they have to like okay it with their partner. Would that be a
I
thing
mean,
that you would do?
and
Even
that's
if it
what,
was coming out from her separate account?
no, because, okay, let me caveat it. we have a financial goal to attain, whatever it is, whether we're buying another house, investment, whatever. So we're naturally going to have a budget and a limit anyway. So before we have our own money based on the joint account, we're already going to have a budget and a limit there because of the financial things that we're going to attain, that we're working towards. So that's the way to put it. Once the money's in the account, there's no, I don't know, if you have 10K in your account and you spend 10K, okay, like we've budgeted for that. I would want to know, wow, you just spent 10K just like that. Wow, okay, cool. All right, cool. Do you know what I mean? We're going to have that conversation, unless I see some serious level of financial irresponsibility.
Yeah.
No issue. And the same thing for her. If I show serious financial irresponsibility for spending that much money just like that, I expect her to address me because of it, because it is a concern for anybody. But before it even touches those things, we'll already have that budget in place because what we're working towards. Now, if we're millionaires and money's not a thing, I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, it's whatever. And by the way, even if we have our joint as a man, doesn't mean I want to say, I'm still going to pay this for you. I'm going to give you this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. All right. Why not? Like, as men, look, we want to look after our ladies, like the African conversation. African men want to look after our ladies. I'm not saying everyone can. I'm not saying it's cheap. Go within your means. But, like, I don't know, man. It makes us feel good. I'll put it that way.
I get it, and I think to a certain point, I definitely agree. I love what Dahlia said. She was like, as long as the bills are getting paid and the savings are filled, what you do with your personal business, it's for you. And she was like, as a wife, I'm not going to stop you from paying the bills. God forbid if I'm a girlfriend, then I'm going to contribute. And I think I agree with that. I think I'm fine contributing regardless of whether it's girlfriend, wife, whatever. But I think there is an element of if that one person is able to handle it, there is an element of stress that does come off of you, and that less stress does help, in a lot of ways. But I think sometimes I always get worried that the deburdening of stress on one person is also the burdening of stress on another person, and that's where it can get tricky, because even if the person is happy for that burden, happy to take on the burden, it's still a burden. So that's the element. And like sometimes in my head I'm thinking, I'll look and I'll be like, oh, he's paying everything. I feel bad that I'm not doing something. And so that's probably where you would think about, okay, what can you do then to help? Like in my last relationship, he paid for everything when it came to like dates and stuff. But there was that, okay, cool, well, what can I do? Cool, I'm going to set up a day where we have a massive day where we go to freaking Harry Potter World Studios and we have a whole day. And that's a fun thing to do. That's what you do. So it's like, you're like, oh, I feel bad, I'm not doing this, but okay, well, I can do this. So let me do this then. And let me plan these surprises, or let me do whatever, or handle the food shopping and all that stuff. So I think, there is that a little bit of that bargaining that happens. If there's a burden on one person, how do you alleviate that burden to help not have it feel so burdensome, if that makes sense?
And you know what? I think I give one, not my personal experience, but one experience I know from a married couple. But when for the example I gave earlier with the guy who they met at university and his wife, she's never worked. She has always been a housewife. And there came a point in time where he snapped at her a little bit because she was always, we want this, we want that. And his response was, well, maybe if you go to work, then maybe you'll be able to afford certain things. Yeah. That wasn't the greatest thing to say, in that situation. And obviously they agreed when they was much younger, this is what the scenario would be instead of paying for nanny. Then I have 5 kids, by the way. Now, in that situation, I would say she should have exercised a bit more wisdom to understand we have to work within our means. And he has a very good job, by the way. He's not broke. He's not broke. Just that he got tired of like the unreasonable demands or expectations. It's like, I'm not saying we can't do this thing, we just can't do them all in one go. But that's the situation where I say a balance is needed and an understanding about, okay, what can we do? And she's also tried to start businesses on the side as well. So there is, a level of wisdom there. I think when you mentioned about the burden on one side, I think you just have to communicate and actually find out You know, how does the guy actually feel? Because what we're also finding out now is that a lot of guys feel obligated to do certain things, but they're not even able to save a penny. You know, and a lot of guys are getting scared because if the woman leaves, I've spent all my money on this. She's hardly spent a penny.
Yeah.
She's got enough to live her life, and I'm just here
Yes.
broke, still having to pay for everything.
Yeah.
You know, and that is a real situation that is on the increase. I remember when I worked for the court system, so I used to deal with a lot of custody things, a lot of divorce things, and a lot of criminal things as well. And there was a particular guy who was crying on the phone to me because he said, "My wife don't talk to me no more. She wants to separate. She wants to divorce. You know, I've spent my life," and he was like maybe 57. "I've spent my life trying to support her and the kids. She doesn't help me pay for anything, but she's still in the house, and I can't even save. I don't even know what to do."
There's a lot of resentment there.
There you go. So it's like, this is a real situation. I don't look at things as nuanced anymore. I feel like there's enough of a lot of situations where, you know, when they say when it comes to deliverance, as you know, as Christians, when it comes to deliverance, it's really sometimes you need to peel back layers. I feel like when it comes to relationships and marriages now, it's not just one thing.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are happening to peel back the layer to get to the bottom of it. That is extremely hard. Extremely hard.
It
So I feel
is.
like,
And finance is a big reason why a lot of people, you know, get divorced, and there needs to be kind of a constant communication. Someone said the pressure is getting worse. There needs to be like a conversation, a constant communication about what is, you know, because there's sometimes where money might be a bit low, like cost of living is going up, so things are going up, it's more expensive. So there has to be a conversation. And that's why for me personally, I don't think I could ever be in a marriage where I'm not working. I think one, because of the nature of what I want my career to be, it's a very intentional choice. It's a career that I've chosen and I've started, you know, and I had to think about how I was going to get to this point from 15, 14. It's a very intentional choice. It isn't something I just fell into. So for me, working is important. You know, it's something that I want to do and it will be done. But that's why I do think that, like, for me personally, I think both people should be working, but there then needs to be a lot of compromises that happen with time management, finances, all of those things. Because there's going to be one person who's earning more, and so if it has to be on the scale percentage, okay, you're earning more, so then your scale percentage is bigger. It's still less than if it was 100% you paying everything for yourself, or you 100% paying everything for the whole family. But it needs to be a situation where we can afford how we're living, but we both can be able to save individually and both be able to finance ourselves and what we want to do. It can't be a situation that you're paying so much money that you can't decide to, you know, go on holiday with your friends if you want to, or you can't decide to buy a new watch or some new shoes or some new Jordans because you're like, oh, I really like those Jordans, but I can't afford it because I've got to do this. Because what happens is that it's a shackle and it's an infringement on that freedom that you feel, and that builds resentment. And if there's not a conversation, it builds resentment, you know? So I think it should be that we should be contributing to the point that we're still comfortably being able to be financially responsible to. And that's, you know, that's kind of what I think. And I think, you know, I in my household, I grew up, both my parents contribute, both my parents work, so that's what I've always seen. I've never seen, oh, the man pays for everything, you know. So for me, the way I grew up, the way I see things is actually, no, I have to contribute. I have to be able to. My mom was always like, no, you have to have your own money. You have to have a career. You have to have your own money. You have to have your things that are yours, because human beings can turn around real quick and you might be left with nothing. And I think that's the same on the man's side too. You have to have things that are your own and you have to be able to maintain that. So that shouldn't be something that should be infringed upon just because you've got a family or a wife now.
I agree. Just to respond to...
Sorry, yes, respond.
Yeah,
I like
Grace, mercy saved. I'm a Christian. The King in J. Anderson stands for Kingdom Need of God, Kingdom Need of Greatness. And I have a men's ministry that I'm building, which is basically, in God's eyes, according to the word, how we are supposed to be as men. So, you know, and a lot of the conversations that we have are to do with this is the way to go. As Christians, anyway. Someone's not a Christian, we don't hold the same, you know, the same expectations, the same measuring stick. That's completely fine. But that's what, you know, I'm about anyway. So we got Jeff here now. How you doing, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, man. You guys hear me?
Yes, but it's
Fresh. You know, you typing.
sorry.
I thought that was me.
Welcome, Jeff. So in the beginning, we was talking about are men, I don't know how much you've heard, but are men allowed to create boundaries? Apparently, the word boundaries is the wrong word to use, but you know what I mean by boundaries. Are men allowed to create boundaries in this day and age?
Yes, they are. I believe men are allowed to create boundaries, but I think it's being consistent with your boundaries. That's the thing. Obviously, over the past couple of days, I think you kind of see what's been going on, you know, the whole Kiki and Darius situation. I think I've gone away understanding that if you're going to create boundaries, be consistent in how you live up to said boundaries, right? If you're someone who has particular principles that you live by, be consistent. That's simple as. Don't be creating boundaries for somebody if you yourself don't even live up to those same principles which you talk about. It's like, for instance, in Darius' case, he wanted a traditional outlook on life, but he's not traditional himself. It's like it goes back to the whole concept, you know. I think in the book of Matthew, was it Matthew chapter 7? You know, judge not, or you too will be judged. For the same account you give unto others, that same account will be given unto you. Like, you hypocrite, take the plank out of your own eye before you seek to take the speck out of somebody else's eye. So you have to look at your own lifestyle, the own life that you're living and how you live, before you start preaching about traditional, or you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. So no one is stopping, I would say this, on a micro scale, nobody is stopping men from having boundaries. The issue just lies in when you try to create boundaries for somebody else, but you are not living by the very codes or principles that you talk about. So that's really the truth of the matter to me. So you can have boundaries. And also, it's finding someone that you're equally yoked with in a relationship as well. That's another situation where I think a lot of times maybe there are men who get with someone who in the initial stages of a relationship, they're thinking, you know what, I can change this person. No, you can't. You literally cannot change someone who lives a certain type of way. It's even as minuscule as, okay, you see an Instagram baddie, let's hypothetically say that be the case. You're going you're going out with someone who's like that, and next thing you know, you're trying to change them. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. Because what happens is that sooner or later, the expectations you put on somebody else, they may not be able to live up to it. So you have to be realistic about who you choose to get with. So, and then it comes to the reason why you pick the person in a relationship, you know, insecurities and all of that. So for me personally, I'm just, yeah, you can have boundaries, but just be mindful of who you assign said boundaries to, why you have these boundaries in the first place, and be consistent.
Can I?
Thank you,
Sorry.
Jeff.
Can I just say, because I just saw the comment from Dahlia. Honestly, look, if you as a woman want to be a stay-at-home mother, I think that is perfectly okay. And there are men out there who want that. Don't ever think that you can't do that if that's what you want. By all means, please don't think because I think that in my thing we should be working. No. I have cousins who their mums are stay-at-home mums, perfectly fine. So yeah, if you want to be a stay-at-home mum, you do that because there has to be. I think having a constant presence at home is great, but it's just about finding somebody who's going to be able to provide that. And of course, as you said in your comment, also being able to have your own finances as well that can help back that as well is useful. Yeah, so don't take AO Logs as trolling because he's trolling in the comments. There are definitely men out there who want stay-at-home mums. So yeah, if that's what you want to do, then by all means go for it. But you know, for me, I'm just saying, me personally, I know I couldn't be a stay-at-home mum. I would probably be very unhappy. But I think if you are happy being a stay-at-home mom, then by all means you should be, because I think you should be where you're happy. So yeah, just to clarify.
Thank you, Precious. So we welcome Angelina to the chat. I think you was the first person.
I am.
How you doing? You were the first
How you
person
doing?
that were using the word boundary incorrectly. So I'd just like you to explain it. How should we be using it? And
the issue I have with the way in which we're using boundaries is a boundary is something that you set for yourself. You don't set it for other people. What you're talking about is requirements for a relationship. And the issue with that, when you use the word boundary as a requirement for, here's the thing, boundaries, a healthy person is expected to respect someone else's boundary. That is an expectation. That is what we all understand. But the requirements of a relationship isn't an automatic respect. And that's my problem with you using the word boundary when you're talking about requirements of a relationship. That is debatable. Boundaries are not. You cannot put a boundary on someone else. You can have a boundary in your life related to what you're doing and how you're interacting, but you cannot be like, oh, do you know what? I don't like you talking to that person. That's my boundary. What the hell? What's happening? It's nonsense. And so when you're talking about, is someone allowed to set boundaries? Is a man allowed to set boundaries? Of course he's allowed to set boundaries for himself. And he's also allowed to set requirements for a relationship. However, those requirements are not necessarily going to be adhered to, not necessarily going to be listened to or respected. They're two very different things. So you keep saying, you know, a boundary, whatever you want to call it. No, we need to make sure and be clear about what we're calling it. Because if you're calling it the wrong thing, you're giving a very incorrect, misguided message. That's what I wanted to say.
But I would push back on that, because
go ahead,
whether it's
please.
a boundary or you call it requirements in a relationship, no one is saying that they have to be adhered to. This is just you saying, for my comfortability, I'm not happy with this. In terms of myself, maybe because of what I've been through or whatever it is, I don't like this. I don't like people who do this, etc. And also, okay, this is what you do. Do you know what? I'm not actually happy with that. Like, to me, none of that needs to be adhered to. That's why we have to make the decision. You know, do we actually want to acquiesce to this or not? If the person is or not going to, we have the decision to make. The reality is most people just don't walk away. We still continue. It's not always the greatest thing. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But that to me is, you know, why I you know what? I agree with the point that you're making, because the boundary word might seem like you're trying to control someone, but that's not what we're trying to say. All we're trying to say is
that, but if you're not trying to say that, that's what I'm saying. If you're not trying to say that, you need to adjust the word, because the boundary is something that everyone inherently understands that they should be respecting someone else's boundary. You cannot say you're putting a boundary on someone else. That's control. That's not a boundary. A boundary is, this is what I'm going to do in this situation because I don't feel comfortable. And that's all about you. That's not about anybody else. As soon as you start throwing it out there, it's another thing. And you say, and it's almost like you're saying, it's like you're renaming requirements as a boundary and then using that to control another person. That's the problem with it. Because if you say, oh, this is a requirement for a relationship, then that's fair enough. A person can take it or leave it. But if you're saying it's my personal boundary, that's implying something different. So the words need to be defined and very clear, because otherwise the conversation itself is toxic.
Okay, I'll let someone else respond to this as well. But the reason why, it's not even that I disagree, but the issue that I have is you're the first person who's putting these perimeters on the words that I've had a conversation with. So when we talk about boundaries, everyone understands naturally. You're talking
Do
about
they, or does everybody understand though?
hold on.
Okay,
In a
carry on.
conversation, in a reciprocal conversation, the conversation is, okay, for me to continue a relationship with this person, these are their requirements. When we talk about controlling, there are extreme things at varying levels,
It
toxic
doesn't
at
have to be
varying levels.
extreme, but carry on.
That's why I said at varying levels that do happen, that would be, okay, this is a problem. But when we have these conversations, we're naturally talking about the requirements, which is why no one has an issue with the word. Like I say,
We're not naturally talking, but the thing is, I am the first person who's highlighting this, but I'm okay to do it, and I'll stand by that, because what you're using is the wrong words, which causes confusion when you're communicating. If you're saying that, because to the people who are listening, to your audience, because you do not have a clear understanding of what they're understanding in the chat. You're saying things, but you do not understand. You don't understand specifically. Now, if you were to define what a boundary was and separate it from the relationship requirement, then you can say that the people in the chat understand what you're talking about. But you're using them interchangeably. So you have no guarantee that people understand what you're saying.
I have a guarantee to the response that people give. I will know.
Not necessarily.
No, necessarily. I'll understand based on how people are responding. If people don't understand, then I'll re-explain in a different way if I need to. But based on the response, people are purely talking about. Let's take the Jonah Hill situation. He is saying, in order to be with him, this is what you have to do. That's a requirement.
And he called it a boundary, and it's not a boundary.
But that's a requirement conversation. And when we use the word boundary, we are naturally talking about requirements.
No, we're not. We're not. When we're talking about boundaries, we're naturally talking about what we accept in our life, in our situation.
You're using the direct definition, but when we all talk about
that's right.
But when we talk about boundaries, we don't address it that way. That's the problem. And I feel like you're holding
that
on to that.
is a problem.
Wait, can I just say, so the reality situation is that boundaries and requirements work together, right? They have a very fluid relationship. They need to be together. Boundaries are there to help you plan and communicate how you respond to someone's behavior, right? So the reality of the situation is, for example, if you have requirements, those are the requirements in your relationship you have. So let's say, like what Jonah Hill saying, if you do this, I feel uncomfortable, blah, blah, blah. The boundaries that you set are how you plan and how you communicate what you're going to do if to what the person does to those requirements, right? So they do work. I think, yes, Angelina has a point that, yes, a lot of the times they are used interchangeably, and that can cause confusion for some people. But I tend to see it as a situation where the boundaries are kind of the actions that you may personally do to the requirements that are being set. So if you have the boundary of, if Jonah was like, this is not comfortable, I don't like this, if this is what you want, then I'm not the partner for me. So in that conversation, he set his requirement, and then he's also set the boundary.
Yeah,
because he's ultimately saying, this is, I'm communicating what I don't find comfortable, and if you can't, I guess, adhere to those requirements, this is how I plan to move in response to that. So I think the conversation is that you kind of have to have both working together, right? And that's where the idea of, like, if you're putting a boundary on someone's, if you are saying to somebody, you have to change this, it's all about the communication. If you're saying you have to change this, right? That's what I was saying earlier about that preventative thing. You shouldn't be preventing someone's behavior. The behavior will manifest. You've made your requirements in the beginning of the relationship, right? You said what you're going to accept. The behavior will manifest, and that's when you move and you decide what you want to do to address that, right? But that's why I said from the beginning, the preventative measures don't work, because that's what becomes controlling. that's the point in which you're like, as I said before, you should be like, okay, I'm going to continue to watch and see if this behavior changes. I've communicated how I feel. I'm going to see what happens. If it doesn't change and I'm still not comfortable and it doesn't look like you're trying to compromise with me, then I think we call it a day. And that's how the relationship between requirements and boundaries should work. So I think that's what I would say in response to that anyway. But I do see what Angelina's saying is that, yeah, they can be used interchangeably, and that can be where the confusion happens. And then in that confusion is where the controlling behavior can then occur.
Exactly. In that confusion is where the manipulation can be, is where the control can be, which is why it's important to define the two. And had he have presented it like, oh my gosh, these are my requirements, and, you know, I'm going to leave if not because that's my boundary, that's fair enough. But he didn't say that. He said the requirements were his boundary. That's not a thing. You know what I mean? That's not a thing.
Well, technically, in the message, he said, "I'm not the right partner for you if this is."
I haven't. Yeah,
so,
and
that is him setting that boundary. He's not setting a control. That part isn't controlling or manipulating.
Yeah,
and I think for me, my issue was that you knew who she was when you got into this relationship, so nothing has changed. That's the bit that I found manipulating, because it's like you knew what the situation was already. That's the issue. But the way he communicated, to be fair to Jonah Hill, he did say, if this is what you need to be happy or to do whatever, I'm not the right partner for you. We can call it a day right now. And that was him setting his boundary.
All right. Let me flip that for you. Okay. So he says, let's look at it another way. So he says, this is my boundary. And he gives you a list of requirements, but we won't get into that because that's his boundary. Okay. And if you don't comply to this, then I'm leaving. Right. And a lot of you are saying, oh, well, you know, he did say that, give him his dues. Or another way of looking at it is it was a if-then condition. It was an ultimatum. That's another way of looking at it. And in that way, it's manipulative again, because she'd already done so many things at which to try and adhere to his boundaries / requirements. And at this point, he's still pushing against that for more. And then says, you know, if you can't do it, then basically I'm leaving. So on the flip side of that, it could also be perceived as manipulation. Because A, he's using the requirements and calling it a boundary, which is not. And then he's saying he's leaving if she doesn't do it. So,
let me go in this.
Can I just say though, but that's kind of going back to my original point, was you knew who this woman was when you
this is my exactly.
You shouldn't have waited. But I will say that when you read word for word verbatim what he says, I don't think the way that he communicated it was an issue. The issue was it has come later down in the line, and that's why it feels manipulative. That's why it feels like an ultimatum. Because if she has her own boundaries, she will say, I'm not comfortable with that. This relationship is over. So that is the reality of the situation. It happens on both sides. So that's why I'm saying, wording wise, it's fine. The issue is that it shouldn't be coming this late in the relationship.
You got to
look at what you were going into, and you've continued to think that somehow you're going to change it, and that is manipulative.
You're precious. Can I also jump in quickly?
Go ahead. Sorry.
It also, Angela, it also comes down to, number one, the intent. There's nothing wrong with establishing having boundaries or requirements in a relationship. It comes down to your intent.
Nothing wrong with that at all. I agree.
And it comes down to how consistent you are in maintaining said boundaries and where these boundaries are coming from. If you're creating boundaries for a specific person in a relationship, knowing fully well the lifestyle that they lived is not compatible with your lifestyle, this is where there could be potential screaming of insecurity, because you're not keeping in line with the same boundaries you set for other people. But if it's based on how you live your life, based upon the consistency in how you do things, then you can't be saying it's insecurity, because as you rightly said, you set boundaries for yourself and you find someone who's complementary to said boundaries. It only becomes a problem when now you're trying to police and dictate how people should move when you yourself are not even living like that. that's when it becomes an issue. You can't create court requirements for people when you yourself are not living up to the very principles or standards that you set for yourself. That would be a level of control. Now, for Jonah Hill, you can make a case where there was an inconsistency, where you know who this person is, you know the lifestyle that this person lives, and you're now trying to create something. But in particular wording, the fact that he has acknowledged that if this is not for you, because if someone is controlling you, they're not even going to give you this ultimatum.
Yeah, they do. They do that all the time, I have to say.
Sorry.
I have to interject there.
Wait,
they do that
on.
all the time. But
wait,
yeah, carry on.
Hold on. If someone is trying to look, if someone, let me rephrase. If somebody is trying to control you, right, they will give you some types of ultimatum. But if someone is not going to control you, they won't be putting stuff like saying, "Oh, I'm not the person for you." They wouldn't be giving you an out like that.
Yes, they do. Covert narcissists do this all the time. It's another way of playing victim. They put themselves in the victim role in order to do the same thing. But carry on.
Fine. No, that's fair. But I also will say the reality situation that not many people in the world are actually narcissists. I want to be very clear about that. I think that word narcissist is thrown around a lot.
Toxic. I said, hey, I said toxics and narcissists. And narcissism is on a spectrum.
I'm just talking specifically about the narcissist part.
Okay,
there's
go
a
ahead.
lot of toxic. There's a lot of toxic people in the world. We're not saying that. I'm just talking specifically about the narcissist part, just to clarify that, because that does get thrown around a lot. But yeah, so that I'm just saying that. But I understand both sides. I think it's just sometimes, you know, as I said, there is a relationship between the requirements and the boundaries. They interflow with each other. They work hand in hand. They inform each other. And I think if as what Jay was saying, I think most people from the chat at least understood where he was coming from with his understanding and definition of how the requirements and the boundaries work, which, knowing Jay, I think are very close to how the actual definitions are. I think, yes, there are definitely interchangeable things that happen, and that does cause confusion. But that's where the communication in the relationship really is important. And being able to, the reality is, if you're able to hold your own boundaries, it will make it a lot harder for somebody to be able to control you. But obviously that's easier said than done. Just so that we have a general, trying to reach a general consensus here, we want to be able to have this conversation, reach a general consensus, rather than going down rabbit holes as we might be doing, just to say. But yeah, I appreciate the conversation.
The allegation from her point of view is that he's toxic, so it's not really a rabbit hole, because if we're looking at what was said in the text, it can be taken a myriad of different ways. But if we look at the surrounding details, it's like he met her when she was surfing. And if you understand the tactics that toxics and abusers use, they can go for people who are in that limelight, the thing, and then try to control them into being something different. That's one thing they do very, very often. So him seeing her in that way and then deciding a month later, 2 months later, or whatever, when they're emotionally attached, that he doesn't like it, is a red flag already. Forget what he wrote down, is a red flag, right? And then in that, he's saying he's given her boundaries. He's given her requirements as though they're boundaries, even though she's already been acquiescent to what he wanted. But now he wants more. From the text, it is clear that she's already taken down some things. So he's already pushing her again to do more in that. This isn't the first conversation. And she has been acting according to what he wanted. And he's pushing it further. Red flag. With no appreciation for what she's already done. Red flag again. Then he's saying, well, you know, if you don't like my requirements, his boundaries, which are actually just relationship requirements that he wants to happen, he's just going to leave the situation. When knowing full and well that obviously she doesn't want him to leave because she's already put in so much effort to acquiesce to what he wants. Red flag. So from that point of view, this is why I'm like, this is toxic. And we need to stop using the word boundary here when we're talking about requirements, because we're getting down a slippery slope where we're justifying toxic behavior. It's not just about what's in writing, it's about what is surrounding that situation. Also, it tells a story. Each element tells a story. That's what we have to look at, and we have to get better at looking at if we want to spot toxic and narcissistic or whatever dynamics.
Now, Angelina, I gotta say, I honestly gotta say, I can see how when you're coming with this level of smoke. I can see why now. I can see this. No, I see what you're saying. I think.
What did you say? You can see why when you're coming with this level of smoke. Sorry, I get really intense when I'm being serious. But yeah, what did you say?
No, I said that's how I know Uncle Ekeni could not mess with you at all. Because
Uncle.
Oh my days. No, but I hear what you're saying. I think there's truth. You can't have these. If someone relates a question to you or not, if you've lived a particular lifestyle, right? You now cannot use these are just my boundaries. Under the guise of a boundary, you're literally just creating more and more requirements, and that highlights more of an insecurity in a person. So I see what you're saying when you're talking about stuff like that. I think
this is why I was hammering home about the boundary thing, because it's all connected. And once if you go that far left, it gets confusing. But yeah, carry on. It can do. Let me give it some grace.
No one in the chat is confused. Yeah. Comments, no one is saying they're confused.
I'm just saying, when it comes down to the intent of a person, that's what I'm saying. If your intent is generally someone where you have a level of respect for how you carry yourself, how you live your life, then there's going to be a normal interchange between boundary and requirements. How I live my life, I'm consistent in what I do, how I see things. So naturally, it's going to come up. Naturally, I'm going to have boundaries put in place. Oh, this is how I do this is how I do that. Please respect and acquiesce towards that. And you give people the choice to either accept it or reject it. Now, if it's coming from a place of genuine intent, fine. But if you're trying to change a person when this is not the lifestyle that they're used to, then there could be potentially a problem. That's all I'm just simply saying. It just comes down to your intent.
Let me go on that, yeah. Because I want to give a fair comparison, because this shouldn't just be a man issue. So the example I used earlier was, I can't remember his name. If someone remember his name, please tell me. But that young rapper who was 19 with the 27-year-old woman, where she said she was okay with him having another woman, and for the duration of the relationship, she wanted to try and stop him doing that. Are we also saying that she's also toxic then? Are we also saying that she's also manipulative? Anyone can go on that.
Sorry, can you repeat that question again?
So there was, I can't remember his name. I don't know if anyone's going to say in the chat.
NLE Chopper. NLE Chopper.
Yeah. So he's 19. So there's already an issue. A 19-year-old guy and a woman wanted him. He was 27. She's now pregnant with his baby, by the way. She was with him, I can't remember for how long, maybe a year, etc. And she agreed to, be with him, and just say it's okay for him to sleep with other women. She agreed in the beginning. After some time, and this is how we need to give people the grace. After some time, she said, I don't like this. And she voiced that to him. He basically said, nah, I ain't stopping this. Or like, what do you think this is? You agreed. Well, what's the issue? And she came on Instagram crying on the gram. Most people clowned her because I was like, what? But you agreed to this. You knew what this was in the first place and you agreed. So the question is, and by the way, she's now going against people who are now, saying something negative towards her. All she says is, I'm pregnant and I'm happy, leave me alone. Okay, cool. So then the question is, based on the example of what we're now saying is toxic manipulation, not use boundaries, that means we should be able to say to her then that she's also toxic, that she also has boundaries, because she's trying to change him. Is she trying to manipulate
Absolutely.
him?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree both ways. This is not a man-woman issue. It's that's toxic issue. That behavior, that pattern of behavior, what I'm seeing surrounding that doesn't look like a healthy situation issue. Mm-hmm. Now, she doesn't have the right to go into a situation and then decide, especially when it comes to career and what they're doing. It's ridiculous. And especially with the Jonah situation, he saw her and approached her based on that very thing that she was doing. And then when they created a connection, he decides, oh no, you got to stop doing that and take down these photos and take down this one and take down that one. And then gets very condescending in the way that he communicates with her. Like she hasn't got the capacity to understand things. Like if she doesn't have the capacity to understand things, why is he with her in the first place? He didn't judge that between the time that they got emotionally attached. Now suddenly, because she's, and she wasn't even pushing against what he was saying in that text. She was asking him if there was anything else, and he was just basically berating her for having any pictures left. You got to look at the context of the situation. Like, it's not just what he's saying. Because of course it can look like, well, I'm just going to leave them. It can look perfectly fine. But in the context of everything else that's going on there, that is not a healthy situation. And back to what you were saying about the woman, same thing. She's getting on the gram crying. Why are you crying? You knew what you would do. The situation was the situation. You knew what he was doing, and that is what you accepted. Now, if you decide somewhere along the line that you don't accept it, and he obviously doesn't want to change, which is his right, then it's time for you to exit that situation. End of story. And anything, and when you go into that starting to cry in the gram, now you're being emotionally manipulative and trying to get weight on your side to get him to do what he already told you he wasn't doing. So it goes both ways. I'm not defending the man-woman issue. I'm trying to get people to understand the complexities of this toxic situation. It's not as simple as black and white. He said this and that's that. That's my point in that. Sorry, go ahead.
I will say though that I think that was a point that was agreed upon in general anyway. I mean, that's definitely what I said when I first joined. All of that is exactly what I said when I first joined. I think that's agreed upon. I think it's a situation where, like, you know, I said sometimes it does feel different when it's coming from different areas, but it's the same thing. It's the same logic, really. And kind of also just to maybe shift the conversation a bit, because I think we've come to a general consensus on that now. But I think somebody in the comments was saying that the idea of, you know, people change, and that, you know, having somebody be able to change their mind, you should be able to give them that space to change their mind. And I think, just to clarify, the issue isn't that you're changing your mind or that you are changing. It's the fact that there's not communication and there's not an understanding. Now, obviously, in that situation that you gave with the rapper, he set his boundary. He was like, well, I'm not doing that. I want to do this. And, you know, and then that from that point on, it's up to her to decide if she's okay with it or if she wants to leave. So it's not the idea that you're saying that if you're in a relationship with somebody can't change or develop or grow, but there needs to be an open and honest communication. There also needs to be grace to understand that people will change and people will grow. And you also have to know your boundaries well enough to know if it's something that you can rock with or not. You know? And that's essentially the dynamics that are happening there. Because also requirements in relationships, they change too. With the seasons, they also change too. But, you know, and your boundaries will also change too. So it's a situation where you just have to have that communication and have that conversation and have it be open and honest and not attacking and not hostile. And it be more about trying to understand rather than trying to convince somebody to go along with what you've changed your mind on, because that person doesn't have to do that. And that's kind of going back to what we said before. The reality of the situation is people do not have to respect your boundary. Mm-hmm. They should, but they don't have to, because a lot of people don't. And that's the reality of that's where you really do need to be strongholding your boundary, and you set that for you. Just like people don't have to respect your requirements. If they want to be with you, they should, but they don't have to. And that's where it's so important for each individual person to be strong in what they need, what they want, and what they expect. Those three things are so vital, because those are the things that are going to guide you in how you maneuver the ebbs and flow of your relationship with people.
I just want to say that I think you know, you guys are making great points. Here's my supplication. I think she's manipulative as well. Sorry to say, I'm going to say it. She chose a perfectly good time. There was no need to choose this time. What was a coincidence that you saw him now be happy, got a kid, family that he wanted originally, that you've now chosen this time to bring out these texts? Maybe it's a coincidence. Do you get what I'm saying to you? Like, I'm not saying that absolves him from anything. We all would agree already that, well, we all agree in different ways. I personally think it's insecurity, and I think that led to control in this scenario in terms of how he went about some of the things he did. That's me personally. But the light of bringing this issue up just as he puts up stuff about him and his girl and him being happy and having a kid, just it's like, and maybe someone could say, well, she was triggered. She saw him happy and etc. But what does that mean? You saw him happy, and then you wanted to what? You felt like you haven't got happiness because of what's happened between you and him, and now you're trying to what? Shit on the stuff. Sorry, my language there. Do on the parade. You know what I mean? For me, it's like, I just feel like you could have done this earlier. If you do this right now, like, I just feel like it does give a little bit like, you baby, you know, you're trying to get your lick back, but maybe this ain't the way. If you really want to, if it's really about you really trying to bring awareness, let it be about awareness. But oftentimes people are not trying to bring awareness. It's almost like when the girl says, I'm going to come to you as a woman. It's not about coming to you as a woman. It's about also them getting a lick in as well and say, well, if I got to suffer, you going to suffer too. You know what I mean? But
okay, Kojo, I hear you, because I didn't really consider that fact. But let's think about it. I have another point of view. I'm just going to throw it out there. Right. Okay. So you're saying the timing was a little bit funny because, you know, he came out with his new relationship and his baby and this, that, and the other. All right. In toxic and abusive dynamics, especially, well, I'm not going to throw the word narcissist out there because people don't like it and whatever. So in toxic and abusive dynamics, there is a stage where a person can get into a new relationship and then start plugging it on the gram in order to trigger the other person. So there's another flip side to that. So maybe she did it this time because she was triggered because he was trying to trigger her. Could possibly be.
And whose fault was that? If you get triggered, whose fault was that? It's not my fault.
No. But
you know what I mean?
I hear what you're saying on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm not saying this is what he's doing. Let's be clear. I'm not saying that this is what he's doing. There's no way and there's no proof that this is what he's doing. Okay. So I'm not going out on a limb to be like, he's trying to, but I'm saying that does happen in toxic and abusive dynamics. So if we were to put that into the equation, it could explain why she came out with it now. It could. I'm not saying that's what's happening because there's no evidence of that. But if I'm going from a toxic and abusive dynamic perspective, that could also be why she came out and did that, which doesn't have anything to do with her being manipulative per se, but more to do with him continuing his manipulation that he started.
But my thing
that's a possibility. I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out there.
In your point, and like, she doesn't know that he's being manipulative or toxic in his current relationship. So
no, I'm saying he's using the current relationship in order to trigger her and continue to be toxic with her in the dynamic. That's what I'm saying.
So I understand that part, and I think even in that situation, as what Kojo said, the accountability and the onus of how you handle that still relies on her. I'm not saying that she shouldn't. You do you. It's your social media. If you want to post it, fine. But the reality is that the response you're going to get isn't always a response that you need or want. So that's the thing that you should go into the situation being fully aware. I don't personally think she's fully allowed to post that if she wants to post it. Granted, I feel like posting text can get tricky, but again, you're a receiver of the text, so it's a two-way party now. Legally, you are, I guess, allowed to post that. So for me personally, I'm not going to really comment too much on whether she should or shouldn't have posted it. That's up to her. I think the reality is there is a form of manipulation in there, because even in toxic relationships where somebody is a victim, there is still forms of manipulation that goes the other way too. That's not to say that that absolves the main perpetrator from their behavior at all, but there are toxic dynamics where there is elements of manipulation happening on both sides.
Absolutely.
So
But
I think that's what Kojo is just basically trying to say, is that I think he's saying that was an element of manipulation. I personally don't think it was in response to his baby. I think it was in response to the Keke Palmer conversation that was happening around the same time. I think she saw that conversation happening, and it gave her the confidence to say, I can come out with my experience of this and how it feels to feel controlled in your relationship and be able to talk about it. The unfortunate aspect is when you do that on social media, the reality of the situation is a lot of people tend to go with who they like the most. And they also tend to go with who they identify with the most. So it, for the majority, has been a clear divide between men and women, of most men siding with Jonah, most women siding with the woman. Now, of course, there's people on both sides that are different, but that's kind of what I've been seeing. I think that jumping on the already having conversation and what was happening with Keke Palmer, yes, there is an element of, I guess, manipulation there, because you're manipulating the situation to your benefit. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because she, as the victim, or at least somebody who's felt controlled in her relationship, wants to use that that topic that's already been talked about, which is now an element of a safe space, to be open and to be honest about what she's feeling. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I think sometimes, manipulation has a negative connotation, but there are elements in which it's not necessarily a bad thing when it's used in a specific context. But I think she had the right to be able to post that and be able to talk about her experience. It is her experience. She was part of that experience. She lived through that experience, and she has the ability to be able to be honest about that. However, how Jonah responds to that moving forward is accountable to him, and her being open and honest is also accountable to her. Whether or not she was triggered by Jonah or not, that's her decision that she took to do, and the fallout is the fallout. But
Precious.
that's my 2 pence on it.
Wait, out of curiosity, what you said, manipulation isn't always a bad thing, but in what context is manipulation in a relationship a good thing? In what context? Because I've tried to see that.
Jeff, your internet.
Again, you transformed. But anyway.
All right, Precious, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. So I think it's just about how you communicate with people, right? Because the reality is that everyone engages in manipulation. Not all forms of manipulation are actually inherently harmful. So for example, do you know what I mean? So for example, like parents and children, let's say, for example, there's a situation, you're like, okay, cool. You do a set thing, you do these chores, and I'll pay you X amount. Or you do this and I'll give you the encouragement. When you do something, I encourage you. You are manipulating the situation to encourage a certain behavior. Not necessarily a bad thing, though, is it? Because let's say, for example, you're teaching your kid how to, clean after themselves, how to be polite, how to do X, Y, Z. So anytime we intervene in something that can affect someone's behavior, it's a form of manipulation. Doesn't always mean it's a bad thing. And it's also, as you were saying, Jeff, the intent behind it too. If the intent behind it is to control, then there you are. If the intent behind it is to encourage, to educate, to I guess help you see how things are going, what is happening, then that is what's happening there. Like helping someone to see something in a different way and changing how that happens. You're interfering in a process there. That is manipulating the process. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes because of the connotations on it, it becomes tricky. Obviously, it's a very nuanced conversation. We're not trying to say, yay, manipulation. That's not what we're trying to say. We're kind of just being more, I guess, very nuanced and technical in in that aspect of things. And obviously people have different opinions on that too. So that's that's not saying that I'm correct at all. That's just I'm just giving an example of where that becomes it.
Can I read some text? I just want to read a text. This is something that also got released by our good sis Sarah Brady as well. So released these texts. And this was a text exchange that they had on the 31st of August 2022. Okay, so he obviously messaged her. I don't know. Well, she put the date as 31st of August 2022, but I don't know. Anyway, she said, I think it's from Jonah. He says, screenshotting intimate text between us is a huge triggering violation for me and breach of trust as a friend. As I have explained to you about breaches of trust I have had between trusted friends recently that have caused me trauma. I'm incredibly hurt and I feel a lack of safety where I have always trusted you. I'm sorry if a former partner moving on is painful and I empathize with that, but I have done nothing wrong. And if I wasn't a public person, I wouldn't face this kind of violation and but I have done nothing wrong. And if I wasn't a public person, I wouldn't face this kind of violation. And having shared that with you and then watching you be like this today shatters my ability to trust anybody even further. I have always shown you kindness and support. I mean, he's putting 2 on 10 there. I can't lie to you. Then it went on and she replied, this is her reply because it's in blue. She says, how do you think I feel over here thinking there was still hope for us, saving room in my heart for you, not able to make room for anybody else? Being a solid emotional support to you the past 5 months, like an effing idiot, doing that completely unaware you're in an emotional headspace to even be able to date people. Stupid me once again, blinded by my love for you and putting up with things I shouldn't. He replies, there's so many insulting and incorrect things said in this paragraph. I will just choose to not get into debate. I don't want to debate. You're someone I care about and did want a family with and was shattered when your behavior showed you weren't able to do that now. I didn't hate you for it. I was shattered because it was all I wanted, but I didn't hate you. I tried to remain as close as testament to my care and love for, let's see what it says, sorry, for you. Okay. So that was a text exchange. Another one.
Oh,
when I say, I'm just gonna say both of them are problem. Both of them are problem. Because that message that he put was 2 on 10. Course but it's like, when you're trying to, and I don't want to I look at it as manipulation, but I look at also as well, when you're trying to get someone back, they hurt you, you're trying to be super slick with your response, like, baby, that you had it all, but you done lost it. That for me is normal relationship stuff. But the fact that she's letting us know that, I've been an emotional support for you. Why have you been there for 5 months doing emotional support? Why are we still here? You know what I mean? Why was you there at the beginning of time? Then it just gives that you are hurt. And that's why I said about releasing the things to the audience now. It doesn't make me think just he's a problem. It makes me think you two are a problem too, because you stayed there for 5 months. What were you thinking was going to happen? You're probably hoping that he was going to change his mind, love you, care about you, want you, etc., etc. And yet you didn't agree with the boundaries. So why would you stick around? You get what I'm saying to you? Like, that this guy, this is what he wants, and you're not able to give him what he wants. That's fine. Walk away. He walks away. Everybody goes their way. But you're doing emotional Tour de France with trying to support him, alongside that. And now we're angry that he feels like, quote unquote, he plays you.
That's what I'm going to talk about.
Oof.
I'm going to rest my case.
Go ahead.
What also happens is that as much as she can call him toxic or anyone can call him toxic, the fact that he has moved on, had a baby, etc., she feels away. 100% she feels away. So I also look at her doing this as a way to get back at him, because he's chosen a life with someone else. Someone else has seemingly, because we don't know, makes him happy and he makes her happy. Seemingly still being the same person. A lot of women will be the first to admit privately, but not publicly, that it does make them feel away to see that particular man who they now see as the enemy moving on and being happy. So this is why it will always look strange with her doing this almost 2 years to the date. It's a question of why. What normally does happen out there? A lot of people don't come out and tell the truth. Let's be honest here. A lot of people don't come out and tell the truth. When they're hurt, when they're upset, some people don't know how to deal with their own feelings. So they just throw whatever they want to throw around. And I agree with what Precious was saying. Because of the time that we live in, because of recent things that are happening, I expect certain things to be thrown out there, mostly about what men are doing. Like, ladies have been doing this for a long time. men go through things, but we don't really do that. We don't really go out there onto social media and put things out there. And if we do that, we're clowned. But let's call a spade a spade. Sometimes hurt people are just trying to hurt the other person. Because in privately, and I said this earlier, publicly, a lot of things are thrown out there, but usually the apology about certain things is private. So ultimately, when things calm down, she may even go to him privately and just apologize. I didn't mean that. I was just hurt. I didn't like the fact that I saw you with a new baby, new girlfriend, living a life. And everyone now calling him A, B, C, D, E has actually got it wrong. Because in the context of their communication, because we know there's certain messages that are missing. We know there's a big context that is missing in how they communicated. We're just assuming, or some people are assuming, it's the worst example of toxicity. Whichever side, we generally do not know. One thing relationships has taught me, one thing counseling people has taught me, which everybody is highlighting, oftentimes, more times than not, they are both as bad as each other. It's just that one side is the side that talks the loudest to the public to hear. And this is where the problem starts. Because to me, we're not addressing the truth if we're only focusing on one side. Because they're both toxic. They're both problematic. Both of them need therapy. Both of them need counseling. Both of them need a true conversation. But if anything, we can see that she's hurting.
Okay. The both being as toxic as each other, when it comes to toxic and abusive dynamics, that's very, very rare. There's always one leader being more toxic than the other, and the other one responded with toxicity in order to defend, in order to get by in the situation, X, Y, and Z. Not necessarily a victim, but not the perpetrator of the toxicity and the abuse, right? So that's out. It happens equally as toxic, happens very, very, very rarely. The thing about this, what I heard from that text, I'm going to give you the other perspective, not saying it's right, but what I heard from that text is following on from what I was saying about him using the person in her face. Because what I heard from that text is they have been maintaining some sort of emotional dynamic at which he hasn't been upfront about what he's been doing outside. What I'm hearing from that text is he's been breadcrumbing and making her think that something is something that it actually isn't. Then suddenly, boof, bam, what fiance? Chat, what's happening? Right? So she's feeling played, obviously, like you would. Right? So which kind of feeds into the thing about him being on the gram, posting his woman, da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, what I'm hearing again is now Sarah's come to the realization of how much she has been manipulated and played all the way through. Because when you're in it, you can't really see it very clearly. But when you get a blow like that, you then get to wait, but then he did and then that. So now she's putting the pieces together, which would explain why that text came out as it has done now. Does that make sense? This is what I'm seeing from that situation. Not saying that is exactly what happened, but that is, if it is a toxic and abusive dynamic, this is very common. And if he left her, it's even more of a reason why he would have that pull on her, especially leaving her in that nice way of, oh, we're just not right for each other, blah, 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 la, la, la. Especially leaving in that way kind of keeps his hooks in the door to be able to continually keep that emotional bond going. So from a toxic and abusive point of view, it kind of still stands with what she said in the first text, or could still stand with what she said in the first text. And her timing being the realization of how much she has been manipulated and controlled the whole time. That's my thought on that.
That's a fair perspective. I would say, okay, so I would say I want to give like an overall with Jonah Hill, right? So when I'm addressing this Jonah Hill situation, I'm addressing solely this particular situation. Because the other allegations that are coming out, he can't beat him. I'm sorry. Whenever there's that, I don't think he can beat him. Okay, because it sounds like he's had some issues in the past. That's another conversation in itself, I guess. But
wait, no, he's had other issues.
Yeah,
it's other issues.
Oh, yeah. Okay, carry on, Coach. Sorry.
Yeah, he's had other issues with previous people. So when I'm addressing this issue, I'm addressing it solely on this issue because I'm making it almost general. You know what I mean? So although it's Jonah, I'm making it almost a little bit more general when I'm addressing it. So that's what I'm saying. I'm still holding the flame and saying, hey, I'm not gonna rule out that he's a manipulator, you know what I mean, or any of those things. But from a general perspective, I think the reason why it riles up people so much, it's less about Jonah and more about as men, what can we put across as a boundary? And what is considered to be okay. But yeah, I mean, some of the things that he said, I mean, look, even in that one, I didn't see. I just saw it as, and maybe because maybe I'm also so used to some level of toxicity that, you know what, certain behaviors I'm like, that's just normal, man. You know what I mean? Or that's avoidable. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like when I break up with you, I'm done. I'm not doing 5 months aftercare. Why am I doing 5 months aftercare? Do you get what I'm saying to you? Like in my head, I think to myself, why would I play myself talking to a girl for 5 months after? And if I and the reason I'm saying that is because I did do that. That's the whole point. You know what I mean? And the person was, what's that? Is that the message?
Don't know if you can read it.
Oh, I had no healthy self-esteem. Having grown up overweight was something that sounds like not a big deal, or like poor you or whatever. But for me personally, it intensely effed me up. Is that from him?
Yeah.
That's probably why he's struggling to put in boundaries. But I mean,
That was
November.
November.
That's why he's probably struggling for boundaries across. But yeah, no. I say that because obviously I've been on both sides of the track, right? You guys always hear my story about how I had a girl at the time and we broke up, and for 12 months I thought the Lord was telling me to wait it out, and she was genuinely lying and everything. And while she was being deceptive and deceiving and all those kind of stuff, I had to also be honest with myself. Why the frick was I still there? And when I look back, the Holy Spirit taught me a very good lesson that I needed practically. Your ass is needy, bro. Like, you need to start working on your boundaries and your self-esteem and your self-worth. The reason why you're there for 5 months after, well, I was there for 12, but the reason why you're there for 5 months and feel like you got played is because you should have never been there. But you didn't have no esteem and no worth. So can I blame the person who was deceiving me? Of course, for deceiving me, they did. But the other aspect is I've got to take some major accountability. You know what I mean? That's how I see life. Maybe that's just maybe I see life. I just see to myself, you can only play me because I allowed you to play me. I'm the fool for allowing you to play me. You know what I'm saying to you? Because you're crying about the fact that 5 months later, I was supporting you emotionally, and I can't believe that. Yeah, you know what? Let's say he lied. Let's say he did breadcrumb her. Let's say he deceived her. Let's say all those things. Why the heck were you still there? Why are you still there? Because you knew his boundaries were, and the boundaries weren't great. So you've allowed yourself to get played. So that's why. So maybe not even necessarily even manipulative per se for her, but working on self-esteem, working on self-worth, working on those things also are quintessential as well. So maybe I can take the manipulation aspect away from her and just say, listen, hey, look, I thought it was a little bit manipulative the way you dropped this bar at this time, but in terms of your behavior, I see it as more, if you had better boundaries, better self-worth, better self-esteem, you don't stay this long because you realize, hey, what you said, I can't rock with it. You know what I mean? It's not my kind of thing.
I thought she was the one that broke up with him.
Is it her that broke up with him? I don't even know.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think that's what she said. I remember seeing that somewhere. I'm not sure. Maybe that's my memory. But again, the same thing applies, because that's the thing. Yeah, there's an element of you do have to have accountability of like people. Everyone's different, and not everyone's going to have the best intentions for you, or even will be able to treat you right. But that's why it's so important to have that element of that self-worth and self-esteem. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't ever get the motivation to work on their self-esteem, all of that stuff until they're hurt, until they're put in their position where they're hurt and they have to pick up the pieces and learn from it. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people do tend to learn the hard way because of early experiences, attachment styles. So they have to learn after being put in that position and having to pick up all those pieces and learn how to better protect themselves from people who don't have the best intentions for them, or at least learning how to have better relationships with people that are healthy.
Not you providing the texts. Sarah also revealed a conversation at the end of their relationship. I told him I would never forgive myself if I turned down a job with like Vans or Roxy for him. She said in a screenshot of a conversation with an unnamed person, and our relationship ended pretty quickly after that. So wait, she
I
said
mean,
she
that
wouldn't
doesn't.
turn down Vans or Roxy.
Yeah, that doesn't really indicate whether she broke up with them or not, but it just sounds at least somebody
Kind of like she did.
somebody called the last straw after that.
I think we
It
can say
sounds-
it's probably mutual. She wasn't willing to not take this opportunity, and he said, "Okay, so this, what do we do from here then?"
Yeah, it's a tricky.
It's tricky.
He
Man.
probably left her because he wasn't able to control the situation. Probably. It's likely. I agree with what you both said. But then we have to take into account she's significantly younger than him.
That's true. 24.
We got to take that into account too. So, you know, he's coming from a more advanced place and she's coming from a more naive place. And what Precious said about, you know, building your self-esteem after the fact is very true, especially for women that can come in a lot, right? We go in with one kind of way of thinking and then come out of it like, wow, okay, I need to fix up because that, no, right? I need to start setting boundaries. I need to start doing this and this and this. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
What I guess on that point as well, I made that point in the beginning. I was saying sometimes for people, I guess, to understand the situation a bit more, who knows? I don't know how old the new girlfriend is anyway, but because I know guys who have dated younger women. Sometimes there is a natural fear about what young people do or their interests or what's going on. So how he's addressing her can be influenced because of her age and what she's doing and who she's around. So you do get a lot of older men who will try to have some level of control, some level of manipulation. They don't all do that, but some people do in order to, I don't know, how can I put it? Just to make sure that she...
Prevent.
Okay, there you go. To prevent what can happen. I mean, one of my friends, he got cheated on with a footballer, for example, or for America, a soccer player.
Jesus Lord.
And one of the things he felt that he couldn't do was put parameters around her because of her age in terms of, he said it to me this way, he doesn't want her to grow up before her age. But she ended up cheating with him, you know, and that ended their relationship. So that has an aspect. That can happen at any age, by the way, but sometimes there can be differences between how you address someone when they're younger or how you address an older person. I'm not saying it's okay. It's just to look at the situation to understand why he may have felt he needed to do all of this. It's because of maybe, his own insecurities, his own fears about what he felt is likely to happen given the age and how he, if anything, doesn't really feel about himself. He's not confident in himself. I made a comment earlier. Every movie now, he just seems unhappy. You know, he don't laugh, he don't smile. Like he's really going through something, and it's. I mean, I hope he's not being a problem in his current relationship.
Yeah.
But the fact that he does need therapy, that he's genuinely not happy, I mean, that means there's definitely things going on with him internally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that happens a lot though when it's a shift. It's a complete mind shift, isn't it? Because you think about, like, if you just think about the psychology of both people, like you think about as he grew up being a certain type of way, being bullied for it, being attacked for it, and it, all based on his physical looks. And he had to then rely on his ability to, I guess, be funny and his ability to do these things to get through that, because that tends to be what happens. Then he gets to the point now where he loses all of this weight and he gets fit and whatever. And I remember he came out saying he doesn't like it when people talk about his body, full stop. Whether you're saying you look good now because you lost the weight or you know, he doesn't like it because he's had his whole life, his whole childhood where people were talking about his looks, focusing on that. And I think that informs a lot of the behaviors that he's probably having in that relationship with that woman, because everything there, well, not everything, but the majority of things are all based on looks, based on physical appearance, physicality, all of that stuff. Things that he clearly has a complex with in general. So it goes back to that thing of it all. all you're a sum of your choices, you're a sum of your experiences. All of your choices and experiences literally affect how you move in relationships and friendships and whatever, in business, all of that. And it all has a point where you look at his life, you can be like, okay, that probably explains this and this and this and this. And I'm sure if we knew more about this woman, we would also find those links to why she ended up in this toxic, relationship, and why there was then 5 months of continuous talking. And there's an explanation. There's all your experiences explain why this is continuing to happen. There's a reason why he decided to go that young. That's a 13-year difference.
True.
There's a reason
Exactly.
why he's done that. There's a reason why she has been okay to go with somebody who's 13 years older than her. So
True.
it's just that we don't know enough about her, so we don't know how to place the pinpoints. And I won't say no names, but there was a current celebrity who's dating somebody who's a good 16 years younger than him, and it's a bit of a side eye, and it's very out of
Marcus Houston?
No, I will say it.
Oh,
Amazing.
yeah.
I will say it in the
Different
private
story,
chat.
that one.
Yikes.
I will say it in the
That was a
private
mad
chat
one.
just because I
It was
like
crazy.
this. I like the celebrity, so I don't want to bait it out.
Say the name. Context.
I will say it in the private chat because I really like him, but he's dating somebody who's 16 years younger than him, and it's very abnormal because he's never done it before, and it's very out of left field. So it's weird, but it's like it's difficult. It's difficult. There's something that you're like, why would you want to go for someone that young? But I guess because of what we know, or at least what I know about him, it doesn't feel sinister, but it does feel weird. But again, age gaps are very common. There's many relationships where, as somebody just said, there's big age gaps. I mean, look at Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones. There's a 25-year age gap there. But I think it also depends on when you meet this person. Like, if this person is younger than 25, I'm looking at you sideways. If this person is older than 26, then I could probably rock with it. Because I think once somebody, especially once a woman gets past 26, there's a lot of mental growth and development and self-development that happens that feels that maybe that relationship won't be as power dynamic struggle, if that makes sense. But if you're dating somebody who's under 25 and there's a 25-year difference, it just feels a bit icky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Icky. So
Okay, I gotta go soon in a second, but let me just read you these. So someone put this little thread together, these texts, so we can actually. And I would show you that by thingy, but my screen doesn't. The internet's not holding strong. So this was the text exchange, which is it's quite interesting actually to see this text exchange. I think it's a bit different. So she messaged him and says, "What's tomorrow like for you? Are you free anytime between 2:40 and 6 your time?" This is on the 30th of August, by the way, 2022. He says, I don't want you to bail on school. That's important. I know I don't need to, but in the spirit of pure respect to our friendship and appreciation for each other, I did want to be transparent that I did start dating someone recently. I'm sorry if that is painful. It just happened. I didn't want to not be transparent with you ever, as I care about you. She said, thanks for letting me know. Probably best if we don't talk for a while and figure out where that's headed. He then said, I appreciate and understand that. The next day, she then texted him saying, no, not that it's really my business, but out of my own personal chicks before Dick's code, if that's headed anywhere other than hookup or fling, I'd appreciate if you make that woman aware of how recently you've been flirting with me, sexting me, and leaning on me for partner level emotional support. He says, I'm sorry, what? And then it goes on further to say, he goes on to say, I have been there for you as a friend, which I have made very clear. And not only is it not your business, as I only mentioned it to you out of respect and friendship, but I have not been flirting with you or sexting you in any way where it would be inappropriate at this time to start dating someone. And if anything, I have felt for your change and tried to be a good and supportive friend as you transition to a scary new environment. And to be crystal clear, I have not flirted or sexted with you in any way, shape, or form in months, and went to say goodbye to you as a super kind gesture that was seemed to have appreciated because it was kind. Okay. And then it says, whatever helps. She says, whatever helps you get through the day. Gotta focus on mine now. Adios, we. He says, new side of you, Sarah. I care about you and will always be a friend as I have been. Yes, we sexted 2 months ago. So 2 months ago they sexted. Okay. Previously to that, which is mean that's still in August. So 2 months ago. Okay. He goes on to say, I have nothing to hide in my life, but I still am entitled to safety and privacy just like you or anyone else. Yeah, so just you and anyone else, I thought you'd understand and honor that. This has really shattered my sense of faith. He does the excellent most. I can't lie to you. This has really shattered my sense of faith in you, in that you are human and I could trust. I thought we would always be friends, Sarah. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm sorry if you bummed, but this line of texting today has really deeply let me down and broken my trust as a friend. He's on some bullshit. I can't lie to you. She said, I'm just showing your own text to me. Can you put yourself in my shoes for a sec? How I might feel gaslit by your behavior and communication. He said, I'm happy to speak on the phone, but no screenshot and intimate text between us, as is a huge triggering violation for me and breach of trust as a friend, as I have explained to you about breach of trust. Okay, I can't lie to you guys. I can't lie to you. I can't roll with him anymore. I can't.
Thank you.
I've tried,
Thank you.
but I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that that she's not without fault.
I never rolled with him.
I'm just saying. No, I'm not. I didn't roll with him per se, but I'm saying the more I'm reading, it's just the. So what I'm saying is what I think. What I'm getting just because that text that he said about he didn't sex text, he didn't really sex. It wasn't really a sex test. I'll be honest with you. The text was more a little bit flat. I think we can't really see what he says. It says no, just holding my. I think he's going to say hard cock. I'm going to be honest with you, but she blurred it out, so I'm assuming that's what he's put. That is sexting. You get what I'm saying? That is sexting. You get what I'm saying? So if you say you ain't been sexting, and then she said you've been sexting, and now she's confused as to why she feels the way she does, I know one comment's not going to kill anybody, but I have to be honest with you. This is, yeah, sir, you got to take some accountability on why she's acting the way it is. But it also makes me think that some of the feeling that she's feeling, the way she's angry, I think she has to be real. I think she has to be real with herself. She's a little bit angry. This isn't just about emotional abuse. This is about he played you. That's what is given. So when I say I'm not rolling with him, what I mean by that is it's going back to my original press about 10 minutes ago, which I said this feels like it's more about the fact that he played you, especially. That's why you're releasing these texts. It's got nothing really to do with emotional abuse. It's more to do with the fact that he played you. That's how you feel. You feel like he played you. After you lot broke up and said you're going to go your ways, y'all started doing all this friendship stuff. He flirting with you. You're not setting no boundaries and saying, hey, don't flirt with me because you're my friend. He's out here playing with you because he knows that you like him still. And he sending these messages. Yeah, it's dark arts. And that's how I'm going to leave it.
Not El Cid saying micro cheating. Yes.
Micro cheating.
That's micro cheating.
That's micro cheating.
That's micro cheating for you right there.
No, I would have said that she played her if I hadn't seen and the first text and all the things that I highlighted from the red flags and his attempts at control and all of that. I would have said he played her. But with that in tone, I would say that constitutes some form of emotional abuse. Especially with the age gap and with the everything, I would say it would constitute some pattern of behavior that falls in line with emotional abuse. If we're putting it all together, if we're just looking at that situation, then yeah, you could be like, oh yeah, he played her. But you've got to take into account the conversations that they're having and the way in which he's manipulating those situations in order to keep the situation going, which he has done. And I agree with you. She's angry. And at this point, I can see she has every right to be angry. That's why she exposed him. Does that mean that she wasn't emotionally abused? No. You can be angry and emotionally abused. Those two can be definitely happen. Go ahead.
I think there's a bit of accountability.
Wait, guys.
She knows that he was in a relationship.
Wait, Pesh. I'm gonna end the live, guys. I'm gonna end the live. Oh wait, actually, because I'm gonna be another hour or so, so I'm gonna have to end the live. But you got contact. We'll talk behind. So, guys, who are in the audience, thank you so much. We appreciate you, love, appreciate, and hope. We will see you guys a little bit later. The guys gonna chop up behind the scenes. Much love, appreciation. Peace.